Hey everyone, how are you all doing? Welcome to my channel. So, today we are gonna see, what if Naruto meets a mysterious blind woman named Theresa, and got harem, part 1. So before we start, go check out the author of this fanfic, BigCC, link is in the description. Also subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Let's start the story. October 10th. In the hidden village of Konoha a great celebration was occurring. On this day, 8 years ago, the great demon fox known as the Kyuubi no Yoko attacked the ninja village only to be stopped by the 4th Hokage who sacrificed his life to destroy the fox. This is the story taught to all of the children both inside and out of the village. But it is not the truth, at least not the whole truth. In truth the Kyuubi was not slain, for it is impossible for a human to slay an entity like the Kyuubi. Instead it was sealed away, not into an object like an urn or a cavern, for those objects could not hold the power of the greatest of the 9 Bijuu. Instead it was sealed into the only vessel that could contain its dread power, an infant whose umbilical cord had just been severed. That child was named Naruto Uzumaki. It was for this reason that the young blonde was hated within the village of Konoha, cursed by a burden he never wished to bear. But our story does not begin with young Naruto. No, it begins with an old woman who is currently making her way into the village, as the festival takes place. She was dressed in strange clothing, a strange, loose, short-sleeved blouse made of strips of red and white fabric held together with leather straps, a skirt with the same coloring, and embroidered with strange symbols that seemed to wiggle and glow under the eyes if one stared too long, a hood, colored red with a single strip of white, connected to the back of her dress, and hid her face in shadows, and a leather traveling bag looped over one shoulder, and carried at her hip. She also wore a great deal of golden jewelry, half a dozen bangles on her left wrist, a bracelet set with a single blue stone on her right wrist, an intricate necklace composed of many hoops of varying shapes and sizes linking together, a pair of golden earrings, and several small chains linked to her hood. Her eyes, however, were her most drawing feature. They were empty pits of pale blue that almost glowed with a dull light. As she walked she watched, as the children ran around, wearing masks and playing with fireworks, her seemingly blind eyes following them while a soft smile made its way on her weathered features. It's good to see children in a ninja village being allowed to hold on to their innocence for just a little longer. But I feel one young soul is not happy. Whoever this young one is, they are in a lot of emotional pain. Intrigued, the old woman walked towards where the feelings of pain were coming from, avoiding running children, vendor carts, and such with a grace that belied her age and poor vision. Naruto couldn't understand it, yet people were mean to him, and gave him mean glares, but no one ever said anything truly mean to him except today on his birthday. He could handle being called Kyuubi brat and demon spawn. He attributed that to being born the day the fox attacked the village. But what that drunk had said to him truly hurt deep down, and he just pulled his knees closer to his chest and continued crying as he remembered what was said, occasionally rubbing his stinging cheek. Naruto was just walking down the street happily munching on some dumplings he managed to get, and at a normal price too. Normally he had to pay a lot for food, but the man was apparently a merchant from Takigakure, the hidden waterfall village. Naruto was smiling, and had his eyes closed, as he walked along thinking that maybe today wouldn't be such a bad birthday after all, until he bumped into a man who dropped his sake bottle. "Oh, sorry about that. I didn't see where I was going." Naruto bowed, as he apologized. "Hey, don't worry you little shit. You just gotta ruin the festival for me, for all of us here in the village." Naruto didn't understand what he was talking about. He could tell the man was drunk, and he began backing up getting ready to run in case things got ugly. "I'm sorry. I wasn't looking where I was going. Lying demon. I bet your parents died when the fox attacked. I know I wouldn't want to take care of demon scum like you. Get out of my sight before I get any angrier," shouted the man, as he slapped the boy across a whiskered cheek, knocking the young blonde backward. Naruto didn't give the man a chance to do anything else. He took off running, his face becoming stained with tears, as he ran to find a place to hide. Why did he say that to me? My parents, if I had parents, would love me. They wouldn't call me demon scum, would they? No, they wouldn't, because parents are supposed to love their children. Naruto looked out from his hiding place, and saw a blonde-haired girl in a nice kimono with her parents. Ino was her name if remembered correctly. She didn't seem to notice him hiding. He watched, as her father picked her up, and put her on his shoulders, as she pointed towards the festival, and told her parents she wanted dumplings, making them both laugh. "Why can't I have that? Where are my parents? Where is the person to hold me and tell me they love me? I know I didn't just pop out of nowhere, so where did you guys go? Why did you leave me?" Dozens of questions ran through his mind, as he looked up at the sky, the setting sun turning the blue sky into a collage of black, orange, purple, red, and blue. It was beautiful to look at, and was one of the few things the young blonde never got tired of watching. While he stared absently at the changing sky, the old blind woman stopped about 10 feet behind him. So this is who I felt. Such sadness and pain should not come from a child, as young as he. But what's this? That energy coming off of his stomach, is that? Yes, it is, a biju, so the child is a Jinchuriki. That would explain why he has so much pain and sadness. The life of a container is never easy, but there is something else, some other power, lying dormant within him. Could it be? Yes it is, but how? Before she could continue her thoughts, she heard the blonde demon container speak to himself. I just wish I had the power to change things, he sobbed softly. Those words, those simple little words, brought back so many memories to the ancient woman's mind. Overshadowing the young blonde, she saw image of a young princess who'd lost her first love to her brother's madness and paranoia. A young boy who'd lost his sister to a madman's delusions and hunger for power, and another boy, kind and strong, who'd fought with everything he had to rescue his sister and avenge his family. Those images made up the ancient woman's mind. It was at that moment that the old woman made her presence known to the boy. But you are a child, or rather you can. Naruto turned around startled at the unknown voice, only to see an old woman standing there. Well, she didn't look that old, maybe 50 or something close to it, but her body stance said she could take care of herself very well. But it was her eyes that drew Naruto's attention. They were pale blue, almost white, which reminded him of another young girl in his class, Hinata Hyuga he thought her name was, only her eyes were milky, not the violet-hued white, which meant she was blind. Do my eyes interest you, child? She asked in a kind voice, looking at Naruto with a small smile. Naruto blushed at being caught staring, but he was more surprised that she could tell he was staring at her in the first place. Was she really blind? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stare. Forgive me, he said with a bow, hoping he'd be forgiven. She gave a small chuckle, and sat down on a nearby crate. There is nothing to forgive a child, you were merely curious, and I cannot blame you for that. After all, curiosity leads to knowledge, and knowledge is the truest form of power. Tell me, young man, what is your name, and you can sit down, I mean you no harm. Naruto just nodded, and sat himself down in front of her, and studied her for a minute. Her attire was strange. He had never seen anything like it when the merchants from the other countries would come to town. But, at the same time, Naruto couldn't help but be fascinated by it. It seemed so familiar, like he'd seen it in a dream some time before, but couldn't remember it. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. What's yours? Responded the blonde with a broad grin. The blind woman gave him another small smile. My name? My name is Theresa Castania, but you may just call me Theresa Naruto-kun. Theresa replied before she reached into her bag, and pulled out a stack of strange cards, and some chocolate, the latter which she gave to Naruto. Here you go, Naruto-kun. Naruto took the chocolate, and sniffed it before deciding it was okay, and took a small bite. Naruto's face broke into a large grin, as he tasted it. It was so warm, and sweet, like nothing the blonde had ever tasted before. After devouring the small bar, the cards she pulled out caught his attention. Say, Theresa, back on, what kind of cards are those? I've never seen playing cards that look like that before. Theresa gave another small chuckle, as she picked up the stack of cards, and began shuffling them. Because Naruto-kun, these are not playing cards. These are special cards that are very powerful. They can not only tell the future, but each holds a unique power that can be drawn on by the wielder. Would you like a demonstration? Naruto was a little skeptical about seeing the future. How can cards show stuff that hasn't happened yet? Thought the 8-year-old curiously. After a while the blonde decided it wouldn't hurt to have his fortune told, plus he wanted to see these unique powers Theresa had talked about. Sure, back on, could you do my fortune first? Theresa nodded, and shuffled the cards again before setting the deck down. However, before she could draw the first card, Naruto interrupted her. Back on? How do you know what card it will be if you're blind? Are you a ninja? He was expecting her to get mad at him, but she surprised him by patting him on the head, and messing up his hair. Naruto-kun, when you become as powerful as me, you don't need to rely on sight. You'll learn that while warriors like the Uchiha and Hyuga take great pride in their eyes, if you remove the powers held in their eyes, they are just like any other human. I lost my eyesight a long time ago, but losing it has helped me to see in ways others cannot hope to imagine, and see much more than my eyes could ever hope to show me. And to answer your other question, no, I'm not a ninja. I am more of a seer than anything else, though I do know how to fight, and have studied some of the shinobi arts. Naruto's mouth hung in awe at hearing that she could see perfectly without her eyes, and decided to test her, and held up 3 fingers. Theresa merely smiled again. 3 fingers, Naruto-kun, now would you like your fortune told or not? She didn't say it in a mean way at all. In fact, she seemed to enjoy that he tested her to see if she was lying about her sight or not. Oh yes, please continue back on. Theresa nodded, as she drew 5 cards, and laid them down in a straight line before flipping the first one over. Naruto couldn't help but slightly gasp at the artwork displayed on the card. It was the Kyubi no Yoko, in all its might and glory. Its head hung back, as if the creature was howling, and its tails were lashing violently into the terrain, destroying most of it. Near the bottom of the image was an open scroll with the words "The Emperor" written in a strange, flowing script. Ah, the Emperor, a great destiny awaits you in your future, Naruto-kun. You hold great power within you, but holding that power comes at great cost, and will draw many dangers to you. The nine-tailed fox is highly linked to your life, intoned Theresa in a calm voice. She then flipped the next card. On it was a strange image that Naruto recognized as the Sharingan, set on a black background. Like the last card on the bottom in an open scroll, the words "The Pinwheel" were written in that same flowing script. The Pinwheel. Many challenges await you down the path that leads you to your destiny. The Uchiha clan will also play a great role in your life, but whether it will be as friend or foe will have to be seen. Naruto wondered if this was true, since he was going into the academy soon for his 2nd year, and Sasuke was going to be in his class this time. Theresa flipped the next card. On this one was the image of a small child holding a teddy bear, with a weird eye with a diamond-shaped pupil resting in its center floating in the background. On the bottom was another open scroll, this one reading out "The Dreamer. The dreamer, you will find those who are lost and in pain, and only you can help them, for you are the only one who can truly understand them." She flipped the next card over, and on it was a coiled serpent, its black scales glistening in the soft light, and below it, still etched onto an open scroll in that odd script, read the words "The Serpent. The serpent, a great foe lies ahead of you, one whose power is nearly unmatched, and whose ambitions refuse to die, but you must be ready to face the darkness ahead." Naruto was in awe. The cards themselves said nothing but the title, and she could gather information from just that. Naruto was wondering if it was possible to learn how to use these cards, though he still wanted to see the last card, and see what they could really do. Theresa flipped the last card, showing a crimson sunrise over a patch of golden earth. At the bottom, the script in the scroll read "The Dawn. The dawn, many dangers and enemies are aligned before you, but stay strong, for the dawn will always pass into the day. Foes from the past, present, and future will come together to fulfill a dark purpose which only you can stop." Naruto at first was worried by the fortunes, but it seemed that he had an awesome destiny where he could actually be a hero, be respected. "Bakon, are the cards always right?" he asked. She smiled, happy he was curious. "Not necessarily, Naruto-kun. Just as the cards can be changed, so too can we change both our own destinies and the destinies of others. Fate is never set in stone. We each forge it with our own decisions and actions. The cards merely tell us the way fate currently flows, and serve as warnings for what may come so that we may change it. You just have to know how to interpret them. Now, if you'd like, I'll teach you how to read the tarot cards later, but I'm sure you want to see the powers they hold first, correct?" she asked. Naruto's fierce nod made her chuckle, as she picked up the card with the snake on it. Now Naruto uses the card's power. You must channel chakra into the card. Depending on which card you use, the amount needed varies. Then you throw, set, or place the card, as you see fit, before calling out its name to activate it. Now some cards will summon creatures while some do other things. Now watch, as I show you the difference between the serpent and the dawn. Theresa channeled some chakra into the serpent card, causing it to glow blue for a moment. "The serpent," she called out. She threw the card, and as it hit the ground it exploded into a cloud of smoke. Naruto watched with excitement, as a huge snake the size of a horse slithered out of the smoke. "Cool!" exclaimed the excited blonde. Theresa could only smile at his innocence. "Now Naruto-kun, to release the card you merely have to either stop channeling your chakra into it or command it to release. Like so, Kai." The snake vanished in another puff of smoke. "Awesome, but what happens to the card when you release it? Does that destroy the card?" She patted his head again, which made him smile. The only person who did that to him was the Hokage. Not in most cases, Naruto. In most cases the card reforms in the holster. However, after each card is used it takes a while to reform, the amount again depending on each individual card. While reforming, a card reabsorbs its power until it's ready to be used again, then it will reappear in its holster. However, some cards are so powerful or unique that when they are activated the power they hold dissolves completely. Some of these cards are destroyed after they're used, or if they're used in a particular way. Naruto nodded. Some of it was a little confusing, but he thought he understood most of it. "Now Naruto-kun, I happened to overhear someone say that today is your birthday. Is that true?" asked Theresa, which Naruto answered with a soft nod. "Well then, every birthday boy deserves a present," she said, making the blonde smile, as she reached into her traveling bag and pulled out a deck of tarot cards. Here is a deck of cards to call your own. They don't have any powers, and are just normal cards. Seeing Naruto's slightly disappointed look, she continued, but if you come back here tomorrow morning, and have memorized each and every card in the deck, I'll teach you how to use the special ones, okay? She finished with a soft grin. The blonde's answer was to leap at her and give her a hug. His warm smile and heartfelt thank yous warmed her old heart. This child deserves some happiness, and if she could, she'd give it to him. With one last teary thank you, Naruto promised he'd come back tomorrow and be a good student. Theresa could only watch as the blonde-haired container ran off, jumping for joy and nearly hitting several crates and trash cans on his way home. She looked down at her deck, still resting in her hand, and drew one last card and laid it down in front of her. On the card was a large man dressed in strange clothing standing atop a giant toad. His head was cast downward, hiding his face. Across the bottom read the Hermit. The Hermit, my, little Naruto-kun, you seem to be destined for great things. Though it's not truly surprising. After all, the members of our family always seem to have great destinies waiting for them. Isn't that right, little brother? She seemingly asked the wind. A soft phantom breeze seemed to stir around the ancient seer, seemingly answering her question. Theresa of the tattered spire merely smiled. It seems the world is once again becoming a very interesting place. Time skip. 7 years later, Naruto's apartment. If there was one thing Naruto Uzumaki hated above all else, it was the dawn. The bright light of the rising sun never failed to rouse him from his peaceful sleep, no matter how hard he tried. That, and the card bearing the same name, seemed to be a constant threat to his life if his readings were accurate, which, after over 7 years of training from Theresa Bakun, they usually were. This morning, like most others, started as the young blonde wished he could find a way to snuff out the insufferable orb of annoying brightness once and for all, as he climbed out of bed and proceeded to the shower. Needless to say, Naruto Uzumaki was not a morning person. As he entered the shower and turned on the water, his thoughts slowly turned to the past 7, going on 8 years. The time since he first met his teacher, friend, and the closest thing he had to family. He had changed greatly since that night so many years ago. He had grown up, both mentally and physically, while under Theresa's gentle guidance. He now stood a slightly tall 5'09", and his body was thin and sleek, lacking any signs of his previous baby fat. A result of good eating, Theresa had managed to convince him to eat more than just ramen, though the noodles were still his favorite food, followed closely by chocolate and physical training, thanks to both Theresa and, a few years later, Irika. While he'd never be described as ripped, the blonde did have his fair share of muscles, all of which were lean and tightly compacted, giving him the build of a runner or swimmer. His hair still glistened a bright sun-kissed blonde, and his eyes now practically glowed a deep, luminous, cerulean blue. His whisker marks had deepened slightly as he aged, becoming slightly more distinct. All in all, the former blonde shrimp had grown into a strong and handsome young man. As he exited the shower, a towel still lying across his shoulders, as he continued to dry his hair, he began to put on his jumpsuit. The orange and blue amalgamation was not something most would describe as ninja-like, but the blonde had grown fond of it over the years, though he knew he'd need to change his attire once he graduated if he ever wanted to be taken seriously as either a hero or a shinobi. After all, who'd respect a guy who looks like a walking, talking bullseye? As the blonde put on his jacket, he reached for the few articles of clothing that he actually intended to keep. All 3 were gifts from his Bakun. The first was the reading deck of tarot cards that she'd given the blonde that night over 7 years ago. Despite nearly 8 years of constant use, practice, and the occasional misadventure, the cards looked the same as they did that night. The colors of the artwork hadn't faded, the edges hadn't been worn down, and not even the smallest of tears or scuffs marred their surface. If one was to take a look, they'd think of a brand new set, not one used by a devoted fortune-teller for over 7 years. When he'd asked Theresa Bakun about that, she'd merely answered, magic and faith, with a small smile crossing her lips. They were placed in a unique holster made of light brown leather clipped on the right side of his belt. Second was his combat deck, a collection of cards imbued with special abilities. Each one was given to him in a small packet from Theresa, usually in small sets of a half-dozen cards, over the years, as she came and went from Konoha. Right now his deck contained at least 1 copy of most of the 78 cards filling his reading deck, but Theresa promised more would come in the future. Each one had a unique gift, and Naruto knew each and every one by heart and memory, a necessary part of his training if he ever wanted to become a true combat seer like Theresa. They were held in a unique holster made of dark brown leather on the left side of his belt. Whenever someone asked why he carried 2 decks, especially with one being at least twice if not triple the size of the other, the blonde would only grin and say spares, as if it was obvious. He didn't want anyone outside of the small circle of people he actually trusted to know about his card's unique powers until he made genin. Too much risk of someone trying to steal them otherwise. But the gift Naruto treasured most was his medallion, his guild seal. It was a beautiful piece, given to him by his Bakon when he turned 10. The center was made of a dark burnished gold, with the hero's guild symbol stamped directly in its center, a pair of small red gems coloring the 2 dots. Heading out of the central circle were 4 long compass points, each pointing outward to one of the 4 ordinal directions: southeast, southwest, northwest, and northeast. Surrounding the central circle was a second circle, this one composed of a dull aquamarine stone, with 4 latches of aquamarine stone edged with gold connecting it to the central circle on each of the cardinal directions. Finally, a ring of the same burnished gold material encircled the entire medallion, connected by the 4 arrowheads. And, see profile for image, the entire object was a bit larger than the palm of his hand, with the ring and arrows extending just beyond edges of his palm, and connected to a silver chain the blonde wore around his neck, letting the seal hang right over his heart. The seal was his most precious possession, one he'd fight tooth and nail to protect. A lesson most of the academy had learned when a group of older bullies had tried to steal it. Said bullies had been forced to quit the academy after Naruto was finished with them, and anyone who saw them would think they'd been mauled by a wolf, instead of beaten up by a 10-year-old. The seal made him feel special, like he was a part of something greater, like he was like the heroes in the stories his Bakon would tell him. That was the thing he liked the most about his Bachan's visits, not the training or the gifts, though those were always great, but the stories. He loved hearing Theresa's stories about the heroes and villains of the ancient world, hearing about heroes who held the power of strength, skill, and will. The stories of great heroes like the fearless Ben Finn, and honorable Major Swift, mighty Hammer, cunning Page, brilliant Garth, kind and loyal Kalen, fearsome Thunder, wise Sabine, swift Whisper, noble Sir Walter, and deadly Briar Rose. Then there were the villains, for what legend can exist without a villain, like greedy Reaver, power-mad Lucian, tyrannical Logan, fallen Maze, cruel Twinblades, and the monstrous Jack of Blades and Crawler. However, the stories of 3 heroes always seemed to captivate the blonde. The hero of Oakvale, who had his family torn apart, and his home destroyed because of Maze's quest for immortality, and Jack of Blades' quest to rule the entire world, but overcame it all to become a true hero, and saved his sister by destroying the sword of Ian's. Sparrow, or the hero of Bowerstone, who fought to avenge his sister's death, and stop Lucian's plot to use the power of a mystic object called the Tattered Spire to remake the world in his image. Finally there was Sparrow's granddaughter, the hero of Brightwall, and Princess of Albion, who lost her love to her brother Logan's cruelty and tyranny, and led a rebellion to free her kingdom, and face down an ancient evil that sought to bathe the world in shadows. For some reason the stories of these 3 heroes seemed to call out the young blonde more than any others. It was all these stories, and many more, that had helped shape Naruto's dreams and desire into what he wished to be. As he had told his Bakon after hearing one of her tales, "I'll be a great hero, just like the others. I'll make myself into a legend the entire world will speak about for generations," he claimed happily. Theresa had smiled at him at that moment, and ruffled his hair affectionately. "With you, Naruto-kun, I have no doubt in my mind that you will." She had started warmly. Naruto couldn't help but smile, and shake his head at that memory. He still carried that dream in his heart along with his dream of becoming Hokage, but there was a third part of his dream that beat in his heart. It was silly compared to wanting to become Hokage or become a legendary hero, but he wanted a family. A big one if he could have it. All the years not knowing who his parents were, not having anyone who he could really care about, instilled a deep desire for the kind of warmth and happiness a family seemed to bring. Granted, that would probably be the hardest part to achieve, since most women, those in Konoha at least, wouldn't want to be near the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Yes, Naruto knew of his connection to the Kyuubi. It had occurred during his year's training with Theresa Bakon. Theresa was teaching him how to meditate in order to focus his mind and help with his chakra control. When the blonde had finally succeeded in entering a meditative state, he accidentally dove too far and entered his own mindscape. Upon entering the dank, sewer-like tunnels, he came across the form of the sleeping Kyuubi. Before anything could happen, Theresa had managed to shake the blonde awake and pull him out of his mindscape. Needless to say, the young blonde had been more than a little confused and freaked by his close encounter with the demon. After managing to calm the then 12-year-old down, Theresa had managed to explain exactly what the blonde had seen before taking him to Hokage for a true explanation. Naruto had been pretty distraught over finding out the truth, and had been royally pissed at the old man for keeping it a secret from him, but in the end Theresa was able to calm him down. His relationship with his adoptive grandfather figure had been pretty cold for a while after that, but the blonde had forgiven the old man in time. Shaking his head away from those depressing thoughts and memories, the blonde finally arrived at the Shinobi Academy. Naruto couldn't help but smile at the small group of his regulars who'd already arrived at his classroom before him, and he was an hour early. Business was always good when the final exams were approaching, and with the graduation exam along with the finals for the lower classes starting tomorrow, his business was booming. The blonde had originally started doing readings in class for anyone who asked, as a way to practice and perfect his skills with the tarot. He originally did it for free, but started charging after the sheer number of requests he faced became overwhelming. Now business was much more manageable, stable for most of the year with small bursts from different classes, and years whenever tests or exams would come up. That, and the extra money helped ensure the blonde could afford to eat more than Ichiraku's. The blonde knew he had more than a little fame as a fortune teller. He'd earned quite a bit just a year after receiving his reading deck from Theresa back on. That day he'd been doing some readings after class, when a man had walked by his desk. The man turned out to be Hyuga Hayashi, Hinata's father, who had come to pick up his daughter from school for a specific clan event. As the man had passed by, a single card from Naruto's deck somehow slipped out of his hand, and landed directly at the man's feet. Stooping down to pick the card up, the blonde saw it was the wand, a card that warned of imminent danger, particularly by lightning. Naruto had told the elder Hyuga about the card's warning, and suggested the man be careful, but the man had simply brushed the blonde off, ignoring such childish superstitions. That night the Kumo ambassador had attempted to kidnap Hinata. Luckily, the blonde's warning had gotten to Hayashi, making it hard for him to sleep that night, and it was only because of this that he was able to rescue his daughter in time. Hinata was fine, but the ramifications of the event had profound effects, particularly for Naruto. After hearing about the incident at the academy prior to the event, many claimed that the boy was somehow involved in the kidnapping attempt, and started demanding his imprisonment or execution, but the Hokage shot them down. If the boy was involved, why would he warn Hayashi? That question shut up a great deal of people, and won Naruto no small bit of fame for his abilities. It was after that the requests for his readings started coming in by the bucket load, so much that the blonde had started charging just so he'd have some time to do other stuff without being swamped with requests for readings. It was also shortly after the Hyuga incident that Hinata's already existent crush on the blonde developed into its near-worship state. At 1000 Ryo a reading, most students wouldn't use a reading out of pure curiosity, though he did occasionally get the occasional curious type who just wanted to see what all the fuss was about. His customers were mostly academy students from all ages, though a few who graduated before him would stop by on occasion to get a reading. Naruto could easily classify most of his customers as regulars, those who came in for readings on an almost habitual basis, stressors, those who came in whenever they were worried about something and wanted advice, and curiosities, those who came in just to see what the hype was about or to try and prove he was full of crap, many of which gravitated toward one of the other two groups after a reading. This morning he dealt with a few of his regulars coming in for their annual visits, a large number of stressors coming in worrying about their finals, and the usual barrage of fangirls asking for their romance fortunes, each of which Naruto had already given at least a dozen times. All in all, it was just another good morning's work for the blonde fortune teller. Hey Dobe. That is, until a rather annoying voice spoke up about 10 minutes before class started. Turning his head, Naruto caught sight of Sasuke Uchiha. Naruto didn't much care for the Uchiha. The dark-haired Uchiha always seemed to have a major pole stuck up his ass, not to mention a major chip on his shoulder. Granted, he was strong, he wouldn't be Rookie of the Year if he wasn't, but the boy's arrogance and poor attitude made him nearly insufferable on the blonde's measure. Giving the Uchiha a calm look, the blonde answered, "What do you want, Uchiha?" he asked calmly. "My fortune," stated the boy seriously. That actually surprised the blonde. Sasuke had never asked for his fortune before, and Naruto had never offered. The Uchiha had often said he didn't believe in that kind of superstitious crap, and often mocked the blonde about his reliance on his cards. Naruto briefly wondered about the sudden change. Was he stressed from the graduation exam or merely curious, before shrugging it off. Whatever the Uchiha wanted for it wasn't his business. "I assume you have my fee?" he asked. "Why should I pay you?" responded the Uchiha. Naruto sighed. This wasn't the first time someone had demanded free reading. Naruto's response was the same, as always. "Because if you don't, I won't do your reading," he responded calmly. "So what if I just take your cards and do it myself?" responded the Uchiha with a smug look. "Do you even know what half the cards in my deck mean?" responded Naruto curiously. Seeing Sasuke's expression, the blonde continued, "I thought not. If you want to threaten to just steal them or destroy them, then what's the point? After all, that does nothing, but waste both our time, and give me an excuse to punch you in the mouth," he finished in a bored tone. Sasuke glared at the blonde for several minutes before reaching into one of his pockets. The blonde momentarily thought the Uchiha was going to try something before his hand came back out holding 2 500 Ryo notes. He placed one on the table in front of the blonde. "Half now, half after I get my fortune told," stated the Uchiha. Naruto shrugged before taking one of the bills and placing it with the rest of his earnings. The blonde then picked up his deck and started shuffling slowly. "So what kind of fortune do you want? Short-term, long-term, character, romance?" asked the blonde. When Sasuke raised an eyebrow in question, the blonde explained, "I offer several different types of fortunes. Short-term are for coming events like the exams, long-term focuses on your life and future in general. Character lets you learn more about yourself, and romance, well, that one's self-explanatory. Since this is your first reading, I can offer a good suggestion if you'd like." Seeing Sasuke shrug in response, the blonde picked up his shuffling speed, causing his hands to slightly blur at the speed of his movements. Sasuke's eyes couldn't help but widen. His hands are moving so fast. "I need my Sharingan to track them," thought the Uchiha heir before the blonde suddenly stopped and offered the deck to him. "Channel chakra into your hand and cut the cards. Don't use a lot, no more than what a civilian can conjure with concentration," instructed the blonde. This was the secret of his fortune telling, a bit of the recipient's own chakra to connect the threads of fate. Sasuke looked at the cards for a second before doing as instructed. The blonde retook the deck and quickly reshuffled for a minute before taking a card of the top and placing it face down, before offering the deck once again to Sasuke with the same instructions as before shuffling again and placing 2 more cards face down, and repeating the process a third time before placing 3 cards along the bottom. The result was a 3-leveled pyramid of cards. Once he placed his deck back on the table, Naruto began to explain. "This is called the Shepherd's Pyramid. It's a very old fortune-telling design. The top card represents you, who you are. The second row reveals what motivates you, what makes you who you are. The bottom row shows your destiny, what will happen as you walk down your path. Now, are you ready to start?" Seeing the Uchiha nod, the blonde flipped the top card, revealing the familiar shape of the Sharingan, representing the pinwheel. Sasuke's eyes couldn't help but widen as he saw his clan's precious beautifully placed on a card. The pinwheel, this isn't surprising. This card has represented the Uchiha clan for a long time. The pinwheel is a card of passion and devotion, a card of obsession. One who is represented by the pinwheel is one born with fire in their blood. Intoned Naruto in what he'd come to call his seer's voice. It was kind of like a meditative state, as he listened to the voice of the cards, and plucked at the weavings of fate. Flipping the first of the 2 cards on the second row, Naruto saw the image of a man dressed in black armor standing over a fallen foe. The card's bottom read out Wrath. Wrath, the card of vengeance. Someone or something has committed a great wrong against you in the past, and now your desire for vengeance drives you forward, intoned the blonde. "Itachi," mentally growled Sasuke, as his fist clenched. So far the blonde was hitting all the targets. Sasuke didn't know how to feel about that. The blonde flipped the next card, only to find it upside down. On the card was the image of a woman wearing pale green robes. In one hand she held a set of scales, and the other a sword. Across the bottom read the simple word justice. "Justice reversed," intoned the blonde. "Personal ambitions hidden under a noble mask. This is the card of one who hides his own feelings and desires under the mask of righteousness. You claim a noble goal, but your heart is fueled only by your own desires." Sasuke gripped his knuckles tighter. Was it true? He claimed to desire vengeance for his clan, to see his brother face justice for what he did, but was that really his goal, or was it all about his personal desire for revenge? Sasuke shook his head. "It doesn't matter. As long as Itachi dies for what he did by my hand, that's all that matters." Naruto flipped the first card of the bottom row, revealing a familiar black serpent. The serpent. "One will come to you with an offer of what you desire the most, but you must be wary. The serpent's offer always comes at a grave price," intoned the blonde, as he flipped the next card. On it were 2 paths, each braced by lines of spears. At the bottom the card read out the crossroads. "The crossroads. The serpent's offer will lead you to a great decision. You must think greatly on this choice, for with your decision, your destiny will be decided." Flipping the final card, the blonde found a trio of lightning bolts all coming down on a single point. Across the bottom was written the word judgment. "Judgment. Be wary of your decisions, Sasuke, for the consequences of both choices are great indeed. Your decision will affect not only your destiny, but the destiny of many others, though whether for good or ill is yet to be determined. All that is known is that you will have to face judgment for what comes after," finished the blonde, as he replaced all the cards back in his deck, before giving it a quick shuffle. "I hope my reading helped you, Sasuke. but now I have some advice. The cards I saw for you tell me that you have a great destiny ahead of you, but be warned, great destinies are not always good ones. Right now your heart is filled with nothing but bitterness and hate, and you must learn to let it go if you want to find any joy in this life. Sasuke gave the blonde a glare before practically hissing, "Don't talk about stuff you could never hope to understand, dope," before throwing his other 500 Ryo bill onto the table, before storming back to his seat to brood and think on Naruto's prediction. Well, that certainly went better than I hoped, thought the blonde, as he picked up the bill and put it with the rest of his earnings, as class slowly began to start. I half expected him to punch me for that, but he just walked away. He even paid me my full fee. As class rolled on, Naruto found himself becoming increasingly bored. Since the graduation exams were tomorrow, today's class was focused mostly on review, stuff Naruto had memorized a year ago. He could have easily passed the exams twice before. Okay, he'd purposely failed the first time, and he'd been sabotaged the second. The reason he'd purposely failed the first time was self-preservation. If certain members of the village thought he was another prodigy like Uchiha Itachi, then they'd no doubt redouble their effort to see him weakened or worse out of fear of the fox. So he hid what he was truly capable of, and focused on improving so when he did decide to graduate he'd be capable of handling anything they threw at him. As the blonde's bored mind continued to wander, he took in the sights of his classmates. His class this year was by far one of his favorites, mostly because he'd actually managed to make a few friends. There was Shikamaru Nara, and Choji Akimichi. The two best friends had actually been pretty nice, and the blonde was happy to count both on his, admittedly small, list of friends. There was also Ino Yamanaka, a childhood friend of both. His relationship with her was odd. The girl enjoyed getting her fortune told, and the two chatted whenever she did, making them acquaintances at least, but the girl suffered from a slight case of fangirlism, which had caused her to distance herself from the blonde. Then there was Shino Aburame. His friendship with the logical young man had actually started quite oddly. The young man had come to him to get his fortune read out of curiosity about the strange behavior, but had dismissed most of it. However, when the event happened just as the cards foretold, and he could find no evidence of manipulation, Shino had accepted the power of Naruto's abilities, stating it was illogical to deny something he'd seen true with his own eyes. The boy was by no means one of Naruto's regulars or even a stressor, but he did like to discuss the cards, and what they meant. Of course, with new friends came new enemies. Well, enemies may be a bit strong of a term, more like annoyances. First was Kiba Inuzuka. The boy was brash and arrogant, traits that constantly annoyed the blonde. Not to mention that the Inuzuka constantly mocked his fortune-telling, calling it girly for a boy to believe in that kind of stuff. Needless to say, the two were not friends, though the dog user's competitive nature did occasionally fuel a somewhat cordial rivalry between them. Then there was Sakura Haruno. The girl was highly intelligent, and refused to believe in such stupid superstitions like fortune-telling. That hadn't stopped the fangirl from coming to get a romance reading so she could have proof that she and Sasuke were destined for each other. Naruto shook his head at that. A lot of Sasuke's fangirls came looking for a reading proving that they and their latest heartthrob were meant to be. Most left disappointed while others continued to come back for more, hoping that another reading would show something more. Sakura had not reacted well to her reading. Ever since, the girl had made it her personal mission to oust Naruto as a fraud, and so far she had failed miserably. The thought of romance readings brought Naruto back to his earlier thoughts of his own family. He'd done a lot of romance fortunes over the years. They were probably his most requested fortune type, but he'd never actually done his own fortune. He'd never really thought about it that much before, thinking only of his desire for a family, not on who it would be with. Deciding that there was no better time than now, the young blonde reached into his holster and pulled out his reading deck. Meanwhile, Iruka was in the midst of his review lecture when he noticed his favorite student pull out his deck of tarot cards. Normally Iruka would have gotten annoyed and shouted out for him to pay attention, but this was different. Iruka knew that Naruto had been holding back in order to protect himself, and it annoyed and saddened the teacher to no end that a bright student had to hold so much back just to keep himself safe. Iruka was surprised that Naruto hadn't graduated last year with his friend Tenten, but the blonde said that unforeseen circumstances interfered with that plan. What these circumstances were, and how they could be unforeseen to Konoha's resident fortune-teller, was still a mystery to him. Don't worry, Naruto. I'll watch your back for as long as I can. After all, if it wasn't for you and your deck of funny little cards, I'd never have gotten engaged to a beautiful, kind, young woman who can cook a mean bowl of ramen, and I'll never be able to repay you for that, thought Iruka with a slight grin on his face, as he returned his focus back to his lecture. Meanwhile, our blonde was in the midst of rapidly shuffling his cards, when something unusual happened. A bit over a dozen cards flipped out of his hands and landed on the table. To most this would be nothing more than an accident caused by a slip of the fingers, but Theresa Bachan had taught there were no such things as accidents when it came to reading the cards. The fact was proven when the wand had slipped from his fingers to warn Hayashi. Naruto looked at the fallen cards, and any thoughts of it being an accident were quickly banished from his mind. For 12 cards had fallen from his grasp, forming a near-perfect circle around the 13th card, the only one that had fallen face up. A card that depicted two young people, a man and a woman, wrapped together in a passionate embrace in a majestic garden, with the bottom reading "The Lovers," in clear letters. For the cards to fall just like that with the card representing love at the center face up, and staring straight at him, there could be no mistake. The cards had something big to tell Naruto about his future love life, and it involved 12 different cards. The sheer number of cards astounded the blonde. Most people could be described in 3 or 4 cards at the most, with a singular card representing them at their truest depths. For 12 cards to appear like this can mean one of two things, mentally concluded the blonde. Option 1. The woman I'm going to fall in love with is immensely complicated. Option 2. I'm going to fall in love with multiple women. Now all that's left is to figure out which is the crazier option. Deciding to put that particular line of thought away until he could consult with Bachan, the blonde reached for the first of the 12 cards, starting at the bottom of the circle. As Naruto flipped the card over, he soon found the card staring back at him with an active Byakugan eye sitting in the center, the words "The Sight" written plainly across the bottom. The Sight? Mentally questioned the blonde. That card usually represents the Hyuga clan, but the only Hyuga girl I know is. He took a quick glance behind him to find the blue-haired Hyuga who his predictions had saved 7 years ago. Hinata-san? I know she's had a bit of a crush on me since my prediction saved her, but could it really grow into love? Another thing I'll have to ask Bachan, concluded the blonde. As he reached and flipped the next card, he found himself staring at a pair of crossed katanas resting over a heart, 4 kunai pointing out the cardinal points, and a dozen shurikens circling the entire image. At the bottom the card read out "The Sword." The sword? That's Tenten's card. But I thought she had a crush on that Niji jerk? Damn, the questions keep on piling up. Bachan and I are probably going to need a long discussion when she gets back, thought the blonde, as he flipped the next card. This one depicted a wild boar charging through a forest, with the words "The Boar" written at the bottom. The boar? That card usually represents the Yamanaka clan if I'm not mistaken, but that would mean the blonde quickly tossed a glance back to his fellow blonde who was currently ogling Sasuke while the Irika lectured on and on. But Ino's a Sasuke fangirl? Does she eventually get over him, or does this card represent another person? Okay, call me a jerk, but I hope it does represent Ino just so I know she'll get over the team, the blonde mentally growled, as he flipped the next card. The blonde was surprised to find a familiar black serpent staring right back at him. The serpent. I've been drawing this card a lot when it comes to both mine and Konoha's future in general. But who do you represent, and how can I have a romantic connection to a being who is supposed to be one of my greatest enemies? Do you represent another person? I did this reading to find some answers, but all I'm getting is even more questions, finished the blonde with a mental groan, as he flipped the next card, this time revealing a large, blue stag beetle flying through the air, the words "The Beetle" written clearly along the bottom. The beetle? Okay, now this is getting odd. Is Shino going to introduce me to a cute cousin of his? Questioned the blonde, since that card did often refer to the Aberrane clan. Shaking his head, the blonde flipped the next card, revealing a single, white snowflake with the words "The Snow" written across the bottom in the normal scroll. The snow? I've never met anyone who was represented by this card before. Maybe I'll meet her in the future, thought the blonde, as he flipped another card. This time it revealed a woman standing in front of a crystal ball, with the open scroll on the bottom reading "The High Priestess." The High Priestess? That card represents Bachan. I love Bachan, but definitely not in that way, so it must represent someone else. Maybe a relative of hers, or someone completely different? Mentally questioned the blonde, as he flipped the next card. Staring back at him was a massive hound standing guard in front of a doorway, the words "The Hound" written on the bottom scroll. Okay, the Hound. That represents the Inuzuka clan. I really don't like Kiba that much, but you never know. Mudboy might be the exception to the rule, and I could actually find a cute Inuzuka girl who I like? Or maybe it represents another girl altogether? Contemplated the blonde, as he flipped the next card. This one depicted a massive sea serpent with the words "The Leviathan" written clearly across the bottom. The Leviathan? Another card I have no experience with, though this card usually represents the seas, so maybe I'll meet her if I ever go on a mission near the ocean, thought the blonde calmly, the chaos in his mind starting to settle after the surprise from the unusual twist fate had thrown at him died down. As he flipped the next card, he found, staring back at him was a man hidden by a heavy cloak, holding 2 masks in his hands. At the bottom the card read "The Mountebank." the mountebank. I've seen this card a few times before. Usually it means someone really good at deception or... I drew this card once before when Gigi's son, Asuma I think, asked me for a romance reading. Maybe the two are connected? I should ask him if he found his trickster yet, thought the blonde curiously, as he flipped the next card. Staring back at him was a tornado that seemed to rip across the open land, and at the bottom written across the open scroll were the words, the wind, the wind. I don't know any wind elements except for Asuma-san, so I probably haven't met her yet, thought the blonde, as he flipped the final card to complete the circle. This one showing a beautiful dark-haired woman dressed in traditional healer's garb, and holding out glowing green hands. The words the Hierophant were written across the bottom scroll. The Hierophant. This card usually represents medic Nin, so maybe the girl I'm meant for is a medic or healer of some kind, thought the blonde curiously. He examined the cards laid out in a circle before him, and began to rub his temples, as a headache began to form. Ag, this is so confusing. No human being alive can have such a complicated and mixed up personality. But there's no way I can be with multiple girls. I'm not a pervert mentally, howled the blonde, as his now growing headache boomed. The blonde's mental conflict intensified, as he tried to figure out what it all meant, until he felt a hand on his shoulder. Looking up from his mental conflict, the blonde found Irika standing over with a worried look. Naruto, are you okay? I let class out almost 15 minutes ago. I asked the concerned instructor. I'm fine, Irika-sensei, just a really confusing reading I did for myself. So I guess I'll just have to wait for Bachan to get back before I can get any real answers, responded the blonde sadly. He was proud of his skills as a fortune teller, and finding a fortune he couldn't read on his own stung his pride more than a little. Well, how about I treat you to some Ichirakus to help get your mind off it, offered the teacher. He didn't like seeing Naruto like this, and his stomach was always a good way to distract the blonde. The fact that he'd get to see his fiancée again while showing off his parenting skills, which Iam had told him was one of his more attractive features, was just a happy coincidence. Seeing the look in the blonde's eyes, the instructor quickly added, but no more than 4 bowls. I need to save up my paychecks to help pay for Iam's engagement ring. Later that evening, Ichiraka Ramen Bar, Naruto, and Irika had arrived at the small ramen bar a short while ago. After Irika got a welcome kiss from his fiancé, the two had placed their orders with Naruto, starting with a large bowl of pork ramen, followed by a bowl of chicken, then a bowl of vegetable, which was Naruto's least favorite, but he tried to eat a bowl with each serving since it was healthier while still being ramen, and finishing with what Ichirakas had dubbed dessert ramen. It was made using a chocolate sauce made from a variety of melted chocolates, a doughy, sugary noodle specially made by Tucci, and mixed with bits of strawberries, marshmallow, and chocolate chips. That little creation had been the brainchild of their #1 customer. While Tucci hadn't expected it to sell, he'd still put it on the menu at the blonde's insistence. He was quite surprised when it became a huge hit. Now it was a favorite dessert treat for the Akimichi clan, after Naruto had brought the clan heir Choji to the stall, and insisted the boy try a bowl, and a number of younger and older customers, particularly older kunoichi with a sweet tooth. It was becoming so popular that Tucci was currently receiving offers from several local sweet shops for the recipe. Hell, one of Hino Kuni's, Fire Nation, main instant ramen manufacturers had stopped in a few months ago to ask if it would be possible to make an instant ramen version of the dish. As the two waited for their bowls to be served, Irika decided to start up a conversation. So, what was that reading about that had you so troubled? Asked the older Chunin curiously. Naruto usually showed very little worry or had any trouble interpreting the fortunes his cards showed him, and he could see that this one was truly frustrating the blonde. The blonde sighed. Well, I was thinking about all the fortunes I've read while at the academy, particularly the romance readings the fangirls constantly ask for to convince themselves they're meant to be with Sasuke. He started, getting a nod from Irika. Well, while I was thinking it occurred to me that I'd never actually done a romance reading for myself, so I decided to try one out, and Naruto's voice trailed off, as he dug into his ramen. What's wrong? Asked the Chunin worriedly. The reading I got back was very confusing, stated the blonde, as he gave a quick explanation of what had happened, and what the formation and sheer number of cards could mean, as their ramen arrived. While he spoke, the blonde's eyes partially closed until they were barely more than slits, a sign Irika recognized for when the boy was deep in thought, particularly about a reading. I have a good idea on who the people represented by the blade, the sight, and possibly the boar are, and maybe a general idea of who or what the Hierophant, the mountebank, and maybe the hound could mean, but the rest have got me stumped, sighed the blonde in defeat over his second bowl. Well, there are only 2 people in Konoha who have a connection to snakes, offered Irika helpfully. Really, who? Asked the blonde. The first is Orochimaru of the Densetsu no Sannin, legendary 3 ninja, also called the snake Sannin. He betrayed the village before you were even born, and is now a very dangerous missing nin. The other would be his former apprentice Anko Mitarashi, explained Irika. Anko, that name sounds familiar. Can you describe her for me? Questioned the blonde. Well, let me think. She has purple hair, pupilless amber eyes, and she usually wears a long, tan trench coat, and a mini skirt over a mesh bodysuit. Oh, and she usually wears her aide across her forehead, and a snake fang necklace around her neck, offered Irika, doing his best to describe the woman's more noticeable features. Naruto snapped his finger. Oh yeah, I've seen her before. She hangs out around training ground 44 a lot, doesn't she? He asked, getting a nod from Irika. That's where I've seen her before. I wonder if, and why the cards are pointing to her, he asked, as he prepared to dig into his last bowl, this one his dessert ramen. Guess I'll have to ask Bakon when she gets back, along with all the other questions that crazy reading has brought on. He mumbled under his breath. So Theresa-san's not back from her latest trip yet? He asked calmly. He'd met the old, blind woman who acted as Naruto's foster grandmother several times in the past, and had come to respect her, even if the woman remained a mystery to everyone around her. No, not yet, stated the blonde, as he shook his head, but she should be back soon. She promised she'd be back in time for the genin exams tomorrow, and Bakon's never broken a promise to me before, finished the blonde seriously. Theresa Bakon had always taught him the importance of keeping his word. The strength of a person's word is the strength of their soul, was what she always told the blonde. And I never intend to, as long as I can help it, stated a mysterious, yet familiar, voice from behind the two. Naruto quickly slurped up the last of his sugary noodles before spinning around in his stool, and launching himself at the source of the voice. Bakon, he happily called out, as he hugged his mentor/grandmother. Good to see her still, as affectionate, as always, Naruto-kun, she stated, as she returned the hug. And it's good to see you, as well, Irika-kun. She started with a small nod at the academy teacher, as she took a seat on the stool on Naruto's opposite side. Good to see you, as well, Theresa-san, returned the man politely. He would gladly admit that the older woman unnerved him slightly, but that was no excuse for disrespect. While I'm glad to see you eating, Naruto-kun, I do hope you've been eating more than ramen, particularly that dessert ramen you created to merge your favorite foods, continued Theresa jokingly. Come now, Theresa-san, don't be too hard on the boy, came the voice of Tsuchiya Chiraku from the kitchen. You've already got our #1 customer to cut his eating here in half. Anymore, and we may go bankrupt, he finished jokingly. Theresa merely nodded her head with a small grin on her face. So Bachan, how was your trip? Asked the blonde curiously, deciding to change the subject before his ramen intake was further limited. It went well with Naruto-kun, responded the aged seer. I traveled across several smaller countries, and found a good bit of inspiration for some new cards, but before that, I believe you two were discussing a certain confusing reading you had before I arrived. Naruto quickly nodded his head before explaining the reading. Theresa listened intently, as Naruto described how the cards fell in a perfect circle around the face-up the lovers, and which cards were in the circle, laying each out across the counter, as he had flipped them. You can see why I'm so confused, can't you, Bakon? I mean, the only logical explanation I can think of for such a large and diverse reading is that I'm supposed to fall for multiple girls, explained the blonde. It is indeed a strange reading of Naruto-kun, but not one without an answer, agreed the woman. She had an idea of what the cards could mean, and it boded well for a meeting she had planned with the Hokage in the near future. But for now it would be best not to burden the young blonde with her own suspicions. For now I'd advise you to put it in the back of your mind. You have more important things to worry about, like the exams tomorrow, suggested the older woman. Naruto reluctantly nodded his head. He didn't like letting any reading go until he had a solid idea about it, but Theresa had taught him that some answers will only come with time. I understand, Bakon, but I'm still curious about what it could mean. Your curiosity will always be one of your greatest strengths, Naruto-kun, stated Theresa warmly. For curiosity leads to knowledge, and knowledge is the truest form of power, finished the blonde, as he completed one of his mentor's favorite sayings. Correct, finished the woman with a warm smile, as she ruffled the blonde's hair. Now about the exams tomorrow, do you intend to finally graduate? I do, agreed the blonde. I've prepared myself, as best I could for everything that could come from graduating, and becoming a shinobi. I'm also ready in case those circumstances come up again, finished the blonde in a low tone. That's good to hear. I actually had a meeting with Sarutobi-kun during that time. Hopefully he and I will be able to watch the proceedings to make sure those circumstances don't get a chance to arise again, agreed Theresa with a slight nod. You know, you two have never told me what these circumstances were, put in Irika, hoping to finally get an explanation from one of the two fortune tellers sitting beside him. Merely so you can't worry yourself over things you could not or cannot control, Irika-kun. Merely know that they are out of your hands, and that Naruto and I are fully capable of handling them ourselves, stated Theresa in a kind yet slightly scolding tone. Irika nodded. Alright, I'll accept it's one of those fortune teller things I'll never be able to understand, but I hope you both know you can trust me to help if you ever need it. I know, Irika-sensei. After all, the temperance is always a card to be trusted and relied on, stated the blonde fortune teller, referring to the card that Naruto said represented him, as he stood up and stretched. Well, I'm going to do a little training before I hit the hay. Speaking of which, do you have any new cards for me back on? He asked hopefully. Theresa merely smiled at the blonde, as she reached into her traveling bag before she pulled out a small brown leather packet. Now Naruto, be careful with these, a few of the newer ones are quite potent, and can only be used once. Make sure to study them thoroughly before you even think of using or testing them, she warned, as the blonde took the packet. Naruto nodded his head in confirmation before taking the packet, and giving a salute before running off. He seems happy now, stated Irika warmly. I just hope he's really ready to become a true shinobi. Naruto-kun is beyond ready, stated Theresa assuredly. I have trained him for the last 7 years of his life, and I can assure you the boy is strong. He has to be for the destiny that awaits him, she finished softly, as she watched the people walk by the stand. Such a peaceful place. I merely hope this peace can last for a while longer, quietly, mused the woman, as she watched a small group of children play, as they passed the small stand. Several hours later we find our blonde returning to his apartment. He'd spent the last few hours practicing for what he knew would be on the test, taijutsu, kunai, and shuriken throwing, and of course the basic ninjutsu. Now he was tired, and ready to head to bed early, but before he did that he wanted to study the new cards his Bakon had given him. Sitting atop his bed, the blonde slowly opened up the small brown leather pouch, and let the cards slip out into his palm. Naruto noticed that there were only 5 cards in the pack. Not as many as normal, but Bakon had said that these were particularly potent. The first ones he noticed was a set of 3 perfectly matching cards. Each one had a dim outline of a person's shadow on a large field of slate gray, except the shadow's eyes seemed to glow a pale, luminous yellow. Across the bottom, written on the standard scroll, were the words "The Shadow." Next was a single card that made the blonde's heart stop. The art on it was dark, and yet strangely beautiful. In the center of the card a heart seemed to rest, wrapped in chains of pure black. At the bottom of the card, its scroll read out, "Oblivion," in cold, harsh letters. The card almost oozed power, but it was a power that Naruto wasn't exactly comfortable with. A dark, almost sinister power. Naruto couldn't help but notice that the card had the dark seal on the back instead of the normal guild seal. The only cards Naruto had with that symbol were the 7 sins, the 4 horsemen, and the devil, all of which were rather nasty cards in his own opinions with sinister powers. Finally was a card that showed a young man, his features vague and indistinct. On half the card the man seemed hale and hearty, a picture of physical health, and garbed in what Naruto assumed was typical Konoha shinobi attire. On the other side was a skeleton, garbed in only the ragged remains of a uniform, its grin perfectly matching the man's. Across the bottom was the card's name, the Rebirth. Like Oblivion, this card also radiated power, but it was a much more peaceful power. Taking a deep breath, the blonde sat in a meditative position, and laid all 3 new cards, one of the Shadow, and the Oblivion, and the Rebirth cards, across his lap. As the blonde's breathing began to slow, the cards began to rise slowly, but surely, until all 3 were floating an inch over the blonde's lap, spinning slowly, as a dull blue aura of the blonde's chakra surrounded each. Several minutes later, the blonde's meditation began to end, and the cards slowly began to lower back to the ground until they were resting peacefully back on his lap. Opening his eyes, the blonde let out a deep breath. "Whoa," breathed out the blonde. "When Bakon said you were powerful, she wasn't kidding," stated the blonde, as he stared at the Oblivion and the Rebirth cards. The meditation was a trick his Bakon had taught him so he could understand the abilities of his cards without her having to be around to explain them to him. It was also a test to make sure any card he created himself was in perfect working order. Theresa had only started teaching him how to craft his own cards a year ago, and right now he could only create some of the least powerful ones. Nothing greater than 2 or 3 stars, but it was a good start. Deciding it was time to get some sleep so he'd be well rested for tomorrow, the blonde quickly put his new cards into his combat holster, while slipping the reading versions, which Bachan included in the back of the pack, into his reading deck before crawling under the covers, and quickly drifting off to sleep. The next morning came with a fairly typical start, Naruto grumbling oaths about how he would one day find a way to destroy the wretched sun once and for all. part of him wanted to go back to sleep since he didn't have to be at the academy early today because he always refused to do readings when there was a big test or similar exercise he had to do that day. He always said that he didn't want to risk tiring himself out since some fortunes could be mentally draining. Unfortunately for him, that proved to be impossible since the blonde's body seemed wired to wake with the rising sun each day, something the blonde personally despised about himself. So after exiting his shower, the blonde put on his jumpsuit and started getting ready to leave. Before he left, the blonde decided to give himself a quick reading. Better to be prepared, particularly if history repeats itself. So sitting down at his table, the blonde drew out his cards and quickly shuffled his cards before lying 5 down across the table. Flipping the first card, he wasn't surprised to find the howling visage of the Kyubi no Yoko staring back at him. The Emperor, my own personal tarot. He started with a soft grin. Whenever he read someone's future, the first card was usually the card that best represented them. For Naruto, it was the Emperor, the card that Bachan had told him represented a great destiny, and his connection to the Kyubi. Flipping the next card, the blonde found the snorting image of a wild boar staring back. The boar, something's going to happen involving Ino today, the blonde mused, as he flipped the next card, this time revealing a man garbed in a thick cloak offering out his hand, while he hid a knife behind his back, the words "the betrayer" written across the bottom scroll. Looks like you're up to your old Mizuki team tricks, but I'm ready for you this time. You won't be able to interfere with my test this time, especially if you try the same tricks as last year, smirked the blonde. The sleazy teacher had managed to foul up the blonde's last attempt, but the blonde was ready for him this time. Flipping the next card, Naruto was surprised to find a card with a vaguely human-shaped puppet on it. The words "the marionette" were written across the bottom. The marionette? Questioned the blonde. So you're just a puppet for someone else's Mizuki team, but I wonder who's pulling your strings? Asked the blonde, as he flipped the last card, revealing an all too familiar black serpent. The serpent, I should have known. But who do you represent? That ankle woman Iruka-sensei told me about. Or this Orochimaru guy who betrayed the village? Muttered the blonde, as he picked up his cards, gave them a quick shuffle, and put them back in their sheath before heading off towards the academy. Naruto arrived at the academy about half an hour before classes started. Sitting down at his usual seat, the blonde reached into one of his jacket's pockets and pulled out a deck of playing cards before he started to play a quick game of solitaire. Most didn't even bother to look up when they saw the blonde start to play. While the blonde loved his tarot cards, they weren't the only cards he carried around. He also carried around several decks of apparently normal playing cards. What most didn't know was that these decks were a present from the Sandaime, and each card had a special seal placed on the back that, when chakra was channeled into them, turned the small cards into razor-edge weapons just as dangerous as regular shuriken. The old man said that he'd come across a couple of shinobi who'd used similar cards during his younger years, as a shinobi, and thought they suited the blonde. The old man had even given him a couple scrolls with special effects based on using the card shuriken a few years later. So far the blonde had managed to pick up quite a few of those, but most of the really advanced ones were beyond his reach at the moment. His game was interrupted a few moments later by a slightly soft voice. "Hey Naruto?" Naruto turned his head to find one Ino Yamanaka, standing next to him. Naruto took a quick minute to study the girl. She was fairly tall for a girl, standing about 5'4" with long platinum blonde hair tied up in a high ponytail that reached down to her waist while her bangs covered half her face, and pupilless light blue eyes. She wore a short, purple, vest-like shirt with a raised collar, a skirt that was cut off on the sides, and bandages on her stomach and legs, as well as purple and white elbow warmers. Naruto had to admit she was an attractive young lady, and she knew how to show it off. "Yo, Ino-san. What's up?" he asked cheerfully. Ino quickly looked down, as she started to nervously rub on of her elbow warmers. "Well, you see, I know it's against your usual policy, but would you mind giving me a reading?" she asked nervously. Now Naruto was surprised. Ino was usually a forceful young woman. For her to be this nervous was rare. "Something wrong, Ino?" he asked concerned. "No," she quickly denied, before seeing the knowing look in his eye, and caved. "Yes, something happened last night, and now I'm really confused. I could just use some advice," she finally muttered out. "Normally it's against my rules to give a prediction on a day like today," Naruto started, and Ino let her expression drop in disappointment. "But for a friend in need, I suppose I can make an exception." The girl's slightly forlorn expression burst into a smile. "Thanks, Naruto. I really appreciate it," she said gratefully. "No problem, Ino-chan. After all, what are friends for?" he stated, as he drew out his reading deck and began to rapidly shuffle the cards. As usual, Ino was amazed at the speed of Naruto's hands. "Wow, how do you do that?" she asked. "Lots of practice," stated the blonde casually, as he continued to shuffle at rapid speeds. It's also good for hand-eye coordination training, one of the reasons I'm one of the top scorers on the target range, he continued, as he offered the deck to Ino, who quickly took it, and cut the cards while channeling a small bit of chakra into her hand. She knew the standard procedure since she'd come for readings quite a few times in the past. Taking back the deck, the blonde shuffled it once more before asking, "How many?" "4," answered Ino, indicating how many cards she wanted drawn. The blonde nodded, and placed 4 cards face down before putting down his deck, and flipping the first one, revealing the image of a wild boar. "The boar, your card," stated the blonde fortune teller with a soft smile, remembering the first time he'd shown Ino her identifying card. The girl was half ready to beat his skull in for the pig joke before he managed the card to represent a strong-willed personality, one who refused to be controlled easily, that had managed to mollify the female blonde's rage, and prevent a rather painful beating on his part. Flipping the next card, Naruto found an image of a black hole with the words, "The Void" written on the scroll below it. The Void, or, as it is sometimes called, doubt. There is something deeply troubling you, your confidence in something you had long thought true has been broken, and now that turmoil seeks to consume you, intoned the young fortune teller, as he looked at Ino with a hint of concern. Ino slowly, and sadly started nodding her head. Last night she had gone to bed early so she'd be well rested for the exams today. An hour later Ino had gone downstairs to get something to drink when she overheard her parents talking. Being the naturally inquisitive girl she was, she had listened in, and what she had heard had shocked and saddened her. Her father had been talking to her mother about his concerns for his daughter's future, worried that she wasn't ready to become a real kunoichi. The man usually doted on his daughter with a vengeance, but the worry and fear in his voice had shocked her. The man had stated that his daughter just didn't take the occupation seriously enough, that she didn't take care of her body by dieting too much, that she didn't take her kunoichi training seriously enough, spending too much time focusing on her crush on the Uchiha boy. Those words had stunned and hurt the young Yamanaka, especially since they came from her own father, a man who normally couldn't so much as frown at his beloved daughter. She'd always believed that she was an excellent kunoichi in training, that she trained hard, and did what was needed to become a true shinobi, but those words had forced her to start thinking. She remembered the time she'd skip training either in class or at home to try and get a date with Sasuke, how she refused to eat so she wouldn't get fat, and how her teachers had warned her it would prevent her from building up more of the necessary muscles that a shinobi needs. In a nutshell, Ino Yamanaka had been forced to look at the direction her decisions had taken her, and she didn't like what she'd seen. That was the reason she wanted this reading, to help her decide what she should do. Looking up at her fellow blonde, she gave him a nod to continue, which Naruto did. Flipping the next card, Naruto found the image of the Kyuubi staring back at him. The Emperor. A strong male figure in your life has offered or will offer you advice on how to deal with the doubts you're facing. Heed their words, for they hold the strength of the truth, intoned the blonde. Ino thought back on her father's words. How if his daughter wanted to be a real kunoichi, she was going to need to get over the Uchiha and concentrate on being a real shinobi. Sure, there was no problem trying to find a bit of romance, but her training needed to come first. Guess I can't ask for a better sign to follow daddy's advice, thought the platinum blonde, as she gave Naruto another nod to finish the reading. Naruto flipped the final card, revealing a woman in traditional healer's robes standing with hands outstretched and glowing with light green energy. The Hierophant. This card represents faith. Have faith in yourself, in who you are, and you will be able to overcome any hardships that life throws at you. Finished the blonde in a warmer tone than before, conveying his own feeling with the card's premonition. Ino smiled at that one. She briefly wondered if Naruto had slipped that one in on his own just to cheer her up, or maybe his cards had picked up on his concern for her and responded to help. Either way, it was a sweet gesture. Thanks for the help, Naruto-kun. Not even noticing she'd added the suffix. Naruto shrugged. Like I said before, Ino-chan, what are friends for? If you need another reading, some advice, or just someone to talk to, you just have to ask, stated the blonde kindly. Ino gave him another smile. Thanks to Naruto-kun, I appreciate it, she said, and before either knew what she was doing, Ino leaned down and gave the blonde a short peck on the cheek. Both blondes were stunned for a moment before Ino quickly turned and headed back to her seat. Why did I just do that? Thought a thoroughly confused Ino. Luckily no one seemed to notice it since the classroom was still pretty empty. Why did she just do that? Thought an equally confused Naruto. Both sat in silence, thinking of what had just happened until Irika and Mizuki came walking in, both carrying sets of written exams for the first part of the genin exams. No time to think about that now, thought the blonde seriously. Got to focus on the test. Weird thoughts about Ino can wait until later. In her seat a few seats back, and to the right Ino was having the same thoughts, only she blushed a little. Meanwhile, the Hokage's office, sitting at his desk Hiruzen Sarutobi, also known as the Professor or the Shinobi no Kami, God of Shinobi, sat drinking a cup of tea, speaking with someone he'd come to consider a friend over the years, Theresa Castagna. The two had met through Naruto, and became close enough to consider each other friends. Whenever the woman came into town, the two always found time to sit and talk over tea. Hiruzen personally enjoyed the company of the younger woman. She was a font of wisdom, and odd bits of lore, something the part of Sarutobi that had earned him the nickname the Professor appreciated. I do wish she'd consider moving into Konoha on a more permanent basis, Theresa offered the elder Sarutobi, as he sipped his tea. It would certainly make young Naruto-kun much happier, though I'm sure he'd miss the stories of your journeys, along with the cards that come with them. He finished with a small smile. Theresa gave a small sigh at that. I know he would, and a part of me would enjoy it, as well, but I'm a wanderer by my nature. I have been since I was a young girl, stated Theresa with a small grin. Oh really? And how long has that been? Asked Sarutobi curiously, trying to find out one of the greatest secrets surrounding the woman, her age. While she appeared no older than his own students, the way she spoke and carried herself showed the weight of years far beyond her appearance. Theresa chuckled at that. Now how many times must I remind you of Sarutobi-kun? It's not polite to ask a woman her age. Even in such a roundabout fashion. She started with a small smile, while she wiggled a single admonishing finger at the Hokage, who chuckled in response. What can I say of Theresa-san? An old man's curiosity knows no limits. He started with a shrug before he noticed the time. It seems it's time for the exams to begin. Shall we watch, and make sure nothing interferes with our grandson's exam? He asked, using an old joke the two shared since Naruto thought of both as grandparents. There were actually a few rumors circulating among the shinobi grapevine that the old Kage and mysterious fortune teller were romantically involved, but they were nothing but scuttlebutt. While Hiruzen greatly enjoyed Theresa's company, he was still loyal to the memory of his beloved wife Biwako. I believe that's a good idea. We need to make sure that Mizuki doesn't try anything again, agreed Theresa. I still can't believe that one of the instructors would attempt to actively sabotage Naruto's efforts, grumbled an angry Sarutobi. He had been royally pissed when Naruto had explained what had happened at the previous exams, but without any evidence there was nothing he could do. You forget how foolish hatred and fear can make people, Sarutobi-kun, stated Theresa neutrally, her voice retaining its calm tone, though I believe young Mizuki has some ulterior motive besides a simple hatred for the Kyuubi. I am simply glad Naruto now knows of his burden, and can now protect himself from the foolishness of others. I still feel guilty about having him find out the way he did. I just didn't want him to have to carry that burden until he was forced to, stated Sarutobi sadly, remembering the blonde's reaction to finding out the fox was sealed inside him. The sadness and betrayal in the young blonde's eyes still haunted him at times. Your intentions were good, Sarutobi-kun, if a bit naive, but no one likes having secrets kept from them, particularly when those secrets involve them in some way. Even if they are kept with the best of intentions, stated Theresa sagely. Sarutobi could only nod, as they watched the testing begin. Alright everyone, explained Mizuki, as he stood in front of the class. We'll be starting the exam in just a few minutes. The first test will be a written exam, he said, patting the stack of papers resting on the desk behind him. You'll have 2 hours to finish all 100 questions. After that we'll head outside for a brief break so everyone can stretch their legs before beginning your taijutsu exam. Each of you will be facing me in a spar while Irika monitors and times us. You'll have to either last 5 minutes with me without suffering a serious hit, which will be judged by Irika, or score a critical blow on me. Don't worry, I'll be holding back. After that we'll proceed to the target range in the academy building. You'll be issued 10 shuriken, and 10 kunai each, and you'll be graded on the accuracy of your total score. You'll also have the option of earning some extra credit after you're done. You can choose a third weapon, which you can either acquire from the academy storeroom or bring with you, as long as Irika and I approve, and test your accuracy with that one to boost your score. Then we'll break for lunch before finishing with the ninjutsu exam. You'll need to perform the following effectively in order to pass: Henji no Jutsu, Transformation Technique, Kawarimi no Jutsu, Body Replacement Technique, and Bunshin no Jutsu, Clone Technique. After finishing the ninjutsu portion, your grades for all 4 portions will be tallied, and you will either receive your 8 or fail. Does everyone understand? A small chorus of yes, hi, and a loud believe it. Our favorite fortune teller answered Mizuki's question. Good to hear. Then let's get started. Stated Irika has picked up his stack of papers, and started handing them out while Mizuki did the same on the opposite end of the class. Irika handing Naruto his. As Mizuki finished handing out his tests to the top row, and started down the stairs. He accidentally dropped a pen from his pocket. As he bent down to pick up the dropped writing utensil, his hands quickly flashed through a hidden set of seals before picking up the pen, and continuing down the stairs to his target's location. Reaching out a hand to affectionately pat the blonde's shoulder, Mizuki gave a false, warm smile. "Good luck today, Naruto. Irika and I are both rooting for you," he said happily, while he felt it take effect. It was a pretty low level, but an effective one for the situation, which targeted the subject's visual perception. It would basically scramble the numbers on the brat's test, so even if he did know the right answer, he'd put it in the wrong spot. And the best part of it was that it was so subtle that no normal genin would notice it. The only problem was that it required physical contact to activate successfully. The man had spent the better part of the past 2 years cozying up to the fox brat, and his soft-hearted imbecile of a coworker for just such an occasion. Naruto had to hide his smirk. The idiot was indeed trying the same tricks as last year, only this time Naruto was prepared. Last year, after his failure, he'd gone to Theresa after seeing his test, and asked the woman what could have happened. When asked if he'd felt anything odd, he did remember feeling a slight surge was probably the best word he could use, of something when Mizuki had touched his shoulder to wish him luck before the test. This had led him, Bakon, and Ajisen to discover another of the boy's hidden talents. He was a censor, or to be more precise, he had the talent to become a censor. Censors, also known as Kanchi Taipu, perception types, are shinobi with the ability to detect and perceive chakra. Censors required both a natural talent and specialized training in order to fully utilize their abilities. One could not train to become a censor without a natural ability, and even a natural prodigy couldn't fully utilize their abilities without some degree of training. Some shinobi believed that censor abilities could be classified as a type for this reason, and the fact that it seemed to be passed down genetically supported that claim. However, with the wide diffusion of censors among the different nations and villages, and some appearing among civilians without any ninja backgrounds, actually proving that it was a genetic trait capable of being counted as a bloodline proved impossible. Konoha was quite well known for the sheer number of censors it possessed. 4 of the village's main shinobi clans had at least some degree of censor abilities. The Aburame clan's Kakechu could hone in on chakra signals and signatures. The Inuzuka clan and their Nikken companions could literally smell chakra. The Byakugan of the Hyuga clan allowed their users to physically see chakra, and the Yamanaka clan was also known to be able to detect the flow of others' mental energy due to their special ninjutsu, allowing for some to develop censor abilities. The village also possessed a large number of censors that weren't aligned with any of the major clans, and were either from lesser shinobi families or simply emerging from the civilian populace. As far as anyone knew, Naruto fell into that final sector. Each censor detected chakra in a unique way. The Aburame felt it through their connection with their insects, the Inuzuka through their noses, the Hyuga through sight, and the Yamanaka through mental awareness. For Naruto, he could feel chakra as it flowed around him, particularly when it was focused to perform a technique. When asked to describe how the chakra felt, he often said that normally it felt like bits of string or cloth brushing against his brain, and when the chakra was being focused it felt like the strings were being knotted or woven together. For the past year a lot of his training had focused on mastering his newest talent. Luckily, with Konoha's large population of censors, it was pretty easy for the boy to get the proper instruction with the Hokage's assistance. Several of his personal bodyguards were censors, and the old man had instructed one of them, a man named Aoba Yamashiro. The boy could now detect the presence of other chakra sources within a 500-foot radius of himself, and that range nearly doubled if they were preparing a. Although he still wasn't skilled enough to precisely determine exact chakra levels or nature, he was able to determine if the presence was animal, civilian, shinobi, or something else, and he could even tell the rough level of a shinobi's aura, whether they have genin, chunin, or jounin level reserves. Bakon had even taught him a censor technique that would allow him to expand his censor abilities when he needed to. Naruto had easily felt Mizuki weaving his little right behind him, and when the traitorous instructor had placed his hand on his shoulder he felt the effect. Giving Mizuki his best smile, the blonde gave the man a thumbs up. "Believe it, Mizuki-sensei. I won't make the same stupid mistakes as last year," he said cheerfully, before adding, "like trusting you." As a quick afterthought, Mizuki gave the blonde another false smile before heading down the stairs. While he and Irika had their backs turned, Naruto slid his hand beneath his desk and formed a ram's seal. "Kai," breathed out the blonde, as he surged his chakra, dispelling the. Dispelling it was no different than dispelling one of his active cards. You just had to break the connection by either cutting off the chakra, or overloading it with a sudden surge. As soon as both teachers were at the front, Irika looked at the clock on the wall, and stated, "You can begin now." With the ruffling of many pages, the first part of the genin exams had begun. It didn't take Naruto long to finish the first part of the exams. The questions were basically the same as the last 2 years, and he'd been able to answer all of those on his first attempt if he hadn't been actively trying to fail. While Naruto wasn't a genius, he wasn't nearly as stupid as most believed. It took him a little less than an hour to answer all the questions accurately enough. He made sure not to get them all exactly right. That would raise suspicions about him cheating if he suddenly got a perfect score in what was supposed to be one of his worst areas. But he also made sure that his answers were more than enough to get him a passing grade by even the strictest instructor. Now came the slightly difficult part. He had to get the test to Iruka-sensei when he wasn't grading other papers without letting Mizuki get his hands on it. He wasn't sure if Mizuki had the balls to actually change his answers or falsify his grade, but he wasn't about to take any chances. So he sat, pretending to work on one question or another, and waited for the right moment. That moment came a little less than a half hour later, about 50 minutes after the test began. Iruka had just finished grading one of the earlier turn-ins while Mizuki was patrolling, checking for signs of cheating. Mizuki was in the perfect spot, on the other side of the classroom from Naruto, so the man couldn't try to intercept the blonde without looking suspicious. Scribbling in the final part of the answer he was pretending to work on, the blonde stood up and raced down the stairs before placing the paper right in front of Iruka, who was just about to stand up and join Mizuki in his patrols. Iruka looked at his favorite student, who was grinning widely at him, and asked, "Everything is okay, no complications?" Naruto merely continued to grin. "Nothing I couldn't handle," he answered smugly. Iruka nodded his head and dismissed his student to join everyone else outside before sitting back down and starting to grade the exam. When Mizuki came down the steps several minutes later, Iruka was just finishing grading the exam and putting Naruto's score, 87 out of 100, in the scorebook for the exams. When he saw the grade, Mizuki's face twisted into an expression that was partly confused, angry, and worried. "Damn it," mentally cursed the traitorous instructor. "How the hell did the brat get a decent score? Not only did I place that on him, but I've been feeding him slightly falsified information for over 2 years now. Did Iruka alter the grade? No, Iruka's too much of a straight-laced, goody-two-shoes to ever cheat, even for his favorite student," thought Mizuki with more than a slight hint of disgust. How Iruka managed to get attached to the damned demon brat he'd never know. Noticing his friend and co-worker's unusual expression, Iruka asked, "Are you okay, Mizuki?" Mizuki quickly turned his expression back to his false smile, and replied, "Yeah, I'm just relieved, and a little surprised, that Naruto did so well on the written exam. He's never been that good at bookwork before," lied the instructor. He was tempted to accuse the brat of cheating, but didn't want to blow his friendly cover with the brat if word got out. He needed them to trust him for his plan to work out. Iruka nodded his head. "Well, you know Naruto, he's always been full of surprises," he offered with a small chuckle. Mizuki forced himself to chuckle, as well, while mentally planning his next move, and cursing getting stuck with the demon lover as his co-worker. A little less than an hour later, the entire class was gathered at the taijutsu sparring ring. The ring was pretty simple, nothing more than a circle with the edge dug deeply into the ground, and lined with smooth paving stones to mark the perimeter. The only thing to separate it from any other sparring ring was its sheer size. It had a radius of about 30 feet on any side. The size was an intentional design since most shinobi battles took place over large areas. Several academy teachers were trained in different jutsu designed to alter the terrain in some ways to help the students learn to fight in different environments and circumstances. Today the ring was an empty field of grass, a field to purely test the students' taijutsu abilities without using the environment. Naruto was currently sitting against one of several trees that surrounded the sparring ring. The spars were going in alphabetical order, so he'd be one of the last ones to go. So he decided it would be best to wait and conserve his energy for the fight to come, and watch the others fight. The way the test was designed, each student would face Mizuki in the sparring ring while Iruka took notes. The scores were based on how long the student lasted, how many, and what kind of hits they scored, and how many hits they actually received, blocked, or dodged. A critical strike ended the match, and the person's score was determined. Lasting through the entire time without receiving a critical hit was an automatic pass, with the full score determined by the other factors, and landing a critical hit on Mizuki was an automatic perfect score. As he sat and watched the other spars, his mind went back to last year's attempt. Mizuki had taken him out before the second minute had ended. The traitorous instructor had allowed the fight to go on, as normal for the entirety of the first minute, only to strike with a sudden and brutal blow to the blonde's stomach halfway through the second minute, after getting extremely close to the blonde. Naruto had seen the attack coming, but the man had struck a lot faster than he had before, taking the blonde by surprise. Naruto guessed the Mizuki had stopped holding back just long enough to land that single blow. With everything else that happened that day, it didn't take a genius to figure out that Mizuki was trying to sabotage him. Now Naruto had to deal with him again. Granted, last time he wasn't prepared for the attack, and was holding back, but Mizuki was still a Chunin-class shinobi, and Naruto would be the first to admit that taijutsu wasn't his forte. It was probably one of his weakest skill areas, along with, while Bachan and Iruka-sensei had both helped him a lot in perfecting and training with the Academy basic style. He knew that the basic style alone wasn't enough to win against real opponents. The Academy basic style was an introductory style designed to give students a basic groundwork in future taijutsu studies. Most jounin senseis either taught their students their own style or offered scrolls and other instruction in unique styles in order to allow their students to develop their own taijutsu. Physically, Naruto could hold his own in a fight. The blonde was remarkably fast and agile, and had more stamina than most chunin and some jounin. The blonde was also deceptively strong despite his lean appearance. The field itself had its advantages and disadvantages for him. The clear field would allow him to move and dodge with a much wider area without having to worry about being backed in a corner. But the lack of obstacles also left him without a lot of defensive options as well. My best bet will be to keep my distance, keep my defenses up, and just wait for time to run out. With any luck, I'll be able to keep Mizuki from getting any surprise hits on me like last time, and maybe even get a chance to land a solid counterattack, thought the blonde, as he stood up and stretched when Uchiha Sasuke was called for his match. About 3.5 minutes later, Sasuke was declared the winner via critical hit with a vicious uppercut to Mizuki's jaw. As the Uchiha left the field, Iruka quickly called out Uzumaki, Naruto, and the blonde stepped into the ring. Both got into positions roughly 10 feet apart, Naruto falling into a loose, defensive stance while Mizuki got into a more balanced stance. Hajime, called Iruka, as he started his timer. After a few moments of trying to stare each other down, Mizuki made the first move. The Chunin charged in, and threw a vicious jab directly at the blonde's face. Naruto quickly jumped back, avoiding the blow, and kept his distance. Mizuki soon followed, launching a barrage of blows while Naruto continued to dodge and avoid, keeping Mizuki at a distance where he couldn't get any power behind his strikes or launch any overpowered attacks without Iruka noticing. After over a full minute of this, Naruto saw an opening. Mizuki threw another straight punch at him, but instead of jumping backwards, Naruto quickly sidestepped and launched a palm strike to Mizuki's open side. It wasn't enough to count as a critical hit, but it hurt like hell. Mizuki quickly rolled to the side to get some distance and lessen the impact of the blow, before coming to a halt and getting into a crouching stance a good distance away from the blonde. Naruto quickly fell back into his defensive stance, while slowly moving to reposition himself at the center of the ring, as Iruka called the 2-minute mark. While Mizuki's appearance remained mostly calm, inside the Chunin was seething. How the hell did the damn demon brat get this good? Mentally hissed the instructor. He's a lot faster than he's ever been in his spars before. His hits definitely pack more of a punch, and his stance is nearly perfect. Did he make some deal with the devil to get this good, or was he faking it before? Damn it, mentally, roared the enraged instructor, as he launched forward in another fierce barrage. Naruto continued to dodge and evade, his body moving quickly and agilely to keep out of Mizuki's reach. The Chunin instructor threw a vicious hook at the blonde, who ducked under it and countered with a low sweeping kick to knock the instructor off his feet. Mizuki quickly jumped back and over the blow before leaping forward with a vicious hammer blow, only for the blonde to quickly backflip out of the way to launch a swing kick at the instructor's exposed shoulder mid-flip. Mizuki hissed in pain as Iruka chimed in at the 3-minute mark. Mizuki was losing all of his patience by now. He knew he had to end this now if he wanted to have any chance of the brat failing this portion of the exam. The Chunin quickly developed a sinister grin before charging forward. Launching a low roundhouse kick to cover his movements, he performed a single hand sign, and hissing, "Doton, Nanjakujibin, earth release, soft earth," under his breath, and slamming his palms into the earth, disguising the motion, as using his hands to propel him into a flip kick aimed at the blonde's head. The blonde dodged the strike, but Mizuki quickly recovered and continued his assault while pushing his target toward his trap. Naruto instantly felt the nodding of Mizuki's chakra, as he created and set his guard up for whatever the instructor had planned. His preparations paid off when, as he moved backward to dodge another strike, the ground beneath the blonde's right foot instantly collapsed, forcing the blonde off balance, as Mizuki dove in to deliver a powerful haymaker to finish this fight. If Naruto hadn't been on alert, he'd have been too surprised to do anything, and the match would have ended. Luckily, the blonde's alert status and years of reflex training saved him. Instead of fighting the fall, which was his first instinct, the blonde tilted his weight, controlling the fall rather than preventing it, and allowing him to dodge Mizuki's attack. Before Mizuki could recover his balance from the overextended strike, the blonde launched forward, regaining his feet, and launching a brutal vertical kick directly at the man's jaw, connecting, and sending the man flying a few feet backward before he landed on his back. Before Mizuki could regain his senses and get back up, he heard Irika blow his whistle. That's enough. Winner by critical hit is Naruto Uzumaki. Good work, Naruto. Thanks, Irika-sensei. And sorry about the kick, Mizuki-sensei. But when the ground collapsed beneath my foot, I just sorta acted on instinct. Apologized the blonde, though the smirk on his face spoke of very little sincerity in that apology. That's alright, Naruto-kun. Nice kick, by the way, very powerful, returned Mizuki, as he got up and rubbed his throbbing jaw, all the while internally cursing the damned fox brat. I wonder why the ground collapsed like that, wondered Irika aloud, as he checked the hole, making sure the ground was stable enough that it wouldn't interfere with the rest of the fights. Maybe you should have the ground checked for moles or something, offered the blonde with the slightest hint of a smirk. That might be a good idea. Remind me to ask the groundskeeper to call someone tomorrow, agreed Irika before he turned to the remainder of the class and called out the next name. A little less than a half hour later, we find the entirety of the class gathered in the subterranean target room. The room was large and rectangular, stretching out about 90 feet in length and 50 feet wide, the size of a regulation basketball court, of mostly clear floor space. The room functioned not only as a target range for the shinobi in training practicing with kunai and shuriken, but also as the school's gymnasium when it was necessary to hold physical training classes indoors, though some teachers insisted on holding those classes outside unless the weather was severely bad to help toughen students to some of the trials they'd face if they became shinobi. The only features were the stairs that led into the subterranean room along one end, and the targets along the other, with a few doors to adjacent storage rooms along the walls stretching between them. The targets were interchangeable, being swapped out based on the course and training program using the field, and were currently holding several wooden training dummies with the vital areas highlighted with red, yellow, and blue paint. The way the test was run, each student received 10 shots with each of his 2 weapons, and the scores were calculated by where they hit. Hitting a red point, which would be an instant kill on a normal person, earned 5 points. Yellow points, which were severe hits that would cause intensive bleeding or other major injuries, were worth 4 points. Blue points, which weren't as damaging, but were still excellent targets like joints, were 3 points, and hitting just the dummy's wooden surface was worth 1 or 2 points, depending on how close they were to red or yellow points. Naruto was one of the first to enter the room, playing the part of the eager student, as he approached Irika to get his brace of 10 kunai and shuriken. While he doubted Mizuki would try something as blatant as giving him rigged weapons, it never hurt to be cautious. Target practice was one of the blonde's best subjects, one of the few areas he allowed himself to openly excel at during his shinobi training at the academy, so he actually wanted to get the high score on this one. He also knew that Mizuki couldn't try and sabotage this area of his test too badly, since Irika or the Hokage would notice if he suddenly failed in his best course. But with the way that Mizuki team's attempts were going so far, he wasn't quite sure what the silver-haired Chunin would try. After all, desperation made people do stupid things. Mizuki was currently having similar thoughts, as he watched the other students make their attempts with their weapons. As Irika tallied their marks, he knew he was running out of options, and if the plan was going to go like he hoped, he needed the blonde brat to fail. He only had this test, and the ninjutsu test left. Messing with the brat's score on this one too much would definitely alert Irika, and even the Hokage, that something was happening, and any suspicions on either of their parts could cause him some major trouble. The best he could do was fudge the brat's scores on this test a little, and hopefully find a way to fail him completely on the ninjutsu test. Luckily, if someone completely failed one of the 4 tests, they couldn't graduate under normal circumstances. So, as Naruto's name was called once again, Mizuki made his move. Sending out a set of invisible chakra wires, he connected each of his fingers to one of the target dummies. The chakra wires were loosely based on Suna puppet techniques, allowing the user to manipulate objects from a distance. It wasn't the perfect control puppet masters had over their weapons. Instead, it was closer to a rough version of telekinesis than puppet mastery, allowing the user to move and manipulate the object through broad strokes rather than the precise control puppet masters favored. Still, with the proper timing, he could make the puppets move just before they got hit, making it look like they were shuddering from the impact, and keep his target from scoring any perfect hits. Naruto had felt Mizuki create his chakra threads, but wasn't sure what he was planning. Deciding to test it before actually starting the serious exam, Naruto took one of his kunai and aimed it for the narrow red line that represented the heart, surrounded by a yellow area striped with thin strips of red representing the ribs and lungs. It should have been a perfect hit, but just before it hit, the puppet jerked slightly to the right, causing it to sink into the surrounding yellow area. Someone who didn't know any better would have attributed it to the momentum of the kunai hitting the target, but Naruto knew better. One of Theresa Bakun's key points in training was making the blonde as perceptive as humanly possible. He'd always been blessed with extremely sharp senses, thanks to him being the holder of the Kyubi no Yoko, and his Bachan's training had sharpened them to a razor's edge. He saw the dummy twitch just a second before his kunai hit. So that's Mizuki's game this time? Internally smirked the blonde. Neat trick, but I wonder if he can move them in different ways. With that thought, the blonde drew his next kunai and launched it at the same spot on the next target dummy, only angling the throw just enough to the right. So if the dummy twitched in the same way, it would be a perfect hit. As predicted, the dummy twitched in the exact same way, and the kunai sank perfectly in the red area. Okay, Mizuki team can only make them twitch in that one direction. That makes things easier. Now I've just got to go through this before he realizes I'm onto him. Confirmed. The blonde, as he withdrew the rest of his kunai, and launched them in rapid succession, each aimed slightly to the right of the red area he was targeting. Mizuki's fingers twitched in rapid synchrony, moving just before his target's kunai made their hit. The silver-haired instructor didn't even have time to notice until after it was over that each of the blonde's kunai were sunk into the red areas of the wood. Damn it! Mentally screeched the Chunin. How did he do that? He must have thought his aim was off with that first throw, and started compensating for it. Better disengage. With any luck he'll continue compensating, and mess up his shuriken test on his own, decided the instructor, as he disengaged his chakra threads, not even realizing that Naruto sensed the release of the Okay, that's 49 out of 50 for kunai. Shame about that first throw. If you'd gotten it right, you'd have gotten a perfect score, stated Iruka. Naruto shrugged. Must have been a bad throw. It happens to the best of us, stated the blonde casually, as he drew out his shuriken. With quick and deadly precision, the blonde launched his shuriken in a rapid flurry, not wanting to give his less scrupulous teacher a chance to re-engage him. Each of the flying shuriken hit its target in a bright red area, marking a critical hit. Iruka whistled, 50 out of 50 for shuriken, and that was some impressive speed, as well, praised Iruka, as he scratched down the final score. Alright Naruto, if you want you can attempt some extra credit now by using a third thrown weapon. Each hit is only worth 3 points if you hit red, 2 for yellow, and 1 for blue, and you only get half your total. You want to give it a try? Naruto nodded his head. Sure, agreed the blonde with a large grin. Iruka nodded his head. So what do you want to use? We have several other throwing weapons stored in the back if you don't have anything on you, asked Iruka, but the man suspected he already knew what the blonde was planning on using. If it's alright with you, sensei, I'll be using. With a flip of his wrists, 5 playing cards appeared in each of his hands, unsheathed from the decks he stored in wrist-mounted sheaths. He finished with a slight grin. Several students started chuckling, and some outright laughed at the display. What are you going to do? Beat the training dummies at a game of poker, shouted one of them. Naruto ignored the echoes of the peanut gallery. He knew they'd change their tune in a minute, while Iruka called for silence. Well, I don't see any problem, do you, Mizuki? Questioned Iruka. Mizuki was curious about what the brat was planning, and decided the brat couldn't possibly make it worse. I don't see why not, he agreed with a shrug. Alright then, agreed Iruka. Naruto smirked, as he quickly twisted, and launched his favorite weapons at a single target, all at once. The results left several students with their jaws nearly touching the floor, and Mizuki staring in wide-eyed disbelief. The 10 cards were each stuck deeply in a red wooden area. 6 filled the narrow strips between the ribs that would indicate passing through the ribcage, and slicing through the lungs, while a 7th quivered in the heart. 1 was jammed into the soft part of the throat, cutting through several arteries, and severing the windpipe, and the final 2 dotted the face, 1 corner through each eye. Iruka cleared his throat. That's 30 out of 30 for the bonus portion, giving you a total of 15 bonus points to bring your new total to 114. Announced the slightly smug Iruka before he called out the next student. Naruto simply went back to his classmates, and enjoyed the stunned silence. While it was important to hide his true skills, it just felt so good to show off from time to time. Mizuki was seething, as he walked around the academy after Iruka dispatched the students for lunch, reminding them to return to the main classroom in 1 hour for the final segment of the test. As soon as he entered a dark corner outside the academy building, a voice suddenly appeared behind him. Is Mizuki-kun wrong? Questioned the voice softly. Mizuki started briefly, as the sibilant voice of his contact, an immediate superior, seemed to whisper in his ear before calming down. The man slowly turned around to stare at his contact. As always, the face he saw was different from the one he'd seen before, this time appearing as a teenager with silver hair and glasses. His main contact to his master made it a habit of alternating through dozens of different faces and disguises every time they met, and he still wasn't sure which, if any, was the real one. It's the QB brat. Somehow the damned brat's either locked or tricked his way out of every trap I've set for him. If I can't get him to fail the ninjutsu portion of the exam, our plan will be ruined, he reported angrily. The young man, or at least the person pretending to be a young man, raised an admonishing finger and waved it in front of Mizuki's face while speaking jovially. Not our plan, Mizuki-kun, your plan? Your only goal is to get the scroll. How you do so is solely up to you, and I will not have my name dragged down due to your incompetence. Understood. The man finished in a low, threatening hiss, radiating killer intent at the Chunin. High. Gulped out the now frightened instructor. Good. Grinned the man, his mood once again doing a complete 180. Now, as for your little fox problem, I think I have just the solution. The man then reached into his pocket and removed two objects, a small glass vial filled with white powder, and a small cloth parcel holding two small pills. Mix the powder in with some liquid, and make sure the boy drinks it. It should destroy whatever chakra control the boy possesses long enough for him to fail the exam. The pills are just in case you get into trouble retrieving the scroll, but use them only as a last resort, instructed the man. Understood. Nodded Mizuki, as he slipped the pills into a hidden pocket in his Chunin vest, and the powder into his pocket. Good. Agreed the spy before he turned, and prepared to leave, before stopping. And do remember, Mizuki-kun, Lord Orochimaru is generous to those who please him, but doesn't tolerate failure in any shape or form, he added in a frighteningly calm tone. With that said, the apparently young shinobi disappeared in a swirl of leaves. Mizuki could only gulp, and pray that his plans worked out. A bit less than an hour later, Naruto was once again sitting in the classroom playing solitaire. He'd enjoyed a quick lunch, a homemade bento he'd made himself, and then meditated until the break was over. Now he sat and tried to burn some time playing solitaire while the first of his classmates were called into the next room to take their ninjutsu test. He was considering asking Choji, Shikamaru, and Shino if they were up for a game of poker while they waited after Akimichi got back from his test when he noticed, as the door slid open, and Mizuki walked in carrying a tray of water bottles for the students. As Mizuki began passing the bottles around the seats, Naruto noticed that his hands kept circling around one bottle in particular. When Mizuki arrived next to Naruto's desk, the man's hand quickly sought out the bottle he'd been avoiding during his ascension. Here you go, Naruto, make sure to keep yourself hydrated. Wouldn't want you to fail the final test because you were too thirsty to concentrate on your, stated Mizuki with a large, overly pleasant grin. Could you be any more obvious, Mizuki team? Thought the blonde sarcastically, as he reached for the bottle. I wonder what he slipped into it, thought the blonde curiously. I doubt it's anything lethal that would get him caught too quickly. Probably something to mess with my concentration or chakra control, so I'll bomb the ninjutsu portion of the exam. With that, the blonde brought the bottle to his lips and pretended to take a short sip, while keeping his lips and mouth pursed shut before lowering the bottle and wiping his arm against his mouth to make sure none of the tainted water entered his system. Thanks, Mizuki-sensei, but I just finished a bottle of milk during lunch, so I'm not that thirsty, he said with a large grin. Mizuki was wondering how much the brat would have to drink for the stuff to take effect. That's fine, Naruto. Just make sure to keep yourself hydrated while you wait for the test to start. You're near the end, so you'll probably have to wait for a while, he said cheerfully, as he turned and left. The wait was indeed a long one, since not only did the students have to perform at the 3 academies, but they also had to wait for their scores to be tallied by Irika and Mizuki before deciding whether they passed or failed. It took a little over 2 hours for Naruto's name to be called. Every time Mizuki came in to call for the next student, he'd glance over at Naruto to see if he'd drunk any more out of his water bottle. Naruto took advantage of this, and slowly emptied his bottle out of the window next to his seat when no one was looking, pretending to drink it slowly and steadily. Naruto could see the excited gleam in Mizuki's eye as he called his name, and he went down the steps and tossed his empty water bottle into the trash. As the two entered the testing room, Mizuki took his seat behind the desk next to Irika while Naruto stood in front. Alright, Naruto, to start we'll test your Henji no Jutsu. First, please transform into either myself or Mizuki, instructed Irika. Naruto nodded and performed the necessary trio of hand seals before proclaiming Henji no and erupting in a plume of smoke. When the smoke cleared, a near-perfect copy of Mizuki stood in the blonde's place. Mizuki and Irika got off their seats, Mizuki standing next to Naruto so Irika could easily compare them. Very good, Naruto, the hair shade is slightly off, but otherwise perfect, stated Irika calmly, as he made a few marks on his scoreboard. Naruto smirked. Last year he transformed into Irika, and Mizuki had taken a lot of points off for several minor details, the length of his hair, the design of the scar, etc. As the two instructors returned to their seats, Iruka spoke again. Alright, now you have a free transformation. Please transform into someone one of us may identify so we can grade. Naruto did as instructed, and once again performed the technique, and when the smoke cleared, Ichiraka stood in her waitress uniform. Hey Iruka-kun, hope you're ready for some of my special ramen tonight, stated the blonde in Iam's voice before giggling seductively. Iruka's hand instantly clamped over his nose to prevent a severe nosebleed at the innuendo of the blonde pretending to be his fiancée. Very funny, Naruto, grumbled the teacher, as he approached the blonde to check the transformation. Mizuki remained seated since he didn't know the ramen waitress enough to inspect it, thus Iruka would be forced to handle it alone. Inside he was cursing the blonde. This was twice he'd been prevented from deducting points in an area where the teacher's personal perspective was most important. As Iruka continued to examine the false Iam, she gave a slight squeal, and said, "Please stop staring at Iruka-kun, you're making me blush." Iruka once again blushed, and was forced to hold in a nosebleed, but he finished his examination, and gave the blonde full marks for the transformation. As he returned to the desk, Naruto dispelled the transformation. Alright, next you'll need to perform a Kawarimi no with one object in this room. You'll be graded on the speed and distance of the replacement, instructed Mizuki. Naruto nodded his head, and waited for Iruka to start his timer. When Iruka pressed the button, Naruto was quickly engulfed in a puff of smoke, and replaced with a chair. Looking around, both teachers found Naruto standing on the third row back of the seats. Iruka nodded his head in approval. Excellent speed on Naruto, and pretty good distance, as well, he stated, as he scratched down a few more notes before continuing. Now for the final section, I need you to create at least 2 Bunshin clones. Naruto nodded his head once more, but instead of performing hand seals, he reached into his large side deck of cards, and ran his finger swiftly over the top while channeling a bit of chakra to the tip of his finger while focusing on the image of the card he wanted. Instantly, as his finger touched the card, it shot up, and stuck itself to his finger. It was a technique Bakon had taught him so he could quickly draw cards in battle. Pulling out the chosen card, Naruto quickly brought it up to his head, and began channeling chakra into it. After a moment he threw it to the ground while calling out, "The brothers," causing a large explosion of smoke to enshroud the blonde. When the smoke cleared, where once stood a single Naruto, there now stood 6 identical copies surrounding the original in various poses. "What the hell?" screamed Mizuki, as he looked at the clones. "I'll explain, Mizuki. Naruto's has a lot more chakra than normal, so instead of performing a regular Bunshin technique, he used a more advanced technique," explained Iruka. "I see, but the rules are quite clear." "I'm sorry, Naruto, but since you didn't complete the academy designation, you fail," apologized Mizuki, while inside he was sporting a rather nasty grin. "What are you talking about, Mizuki? The academy rules clearly states that substitutions to the regular Bunshin are allowed, as long as the instructed amount of clones are produced," asked Iruka. "Ah, really?" questioned the instructor, annoyed that Iruka was interfering with his plans again. "I guess I must have misread that rule, sorry, Naruto," apologized the traitor while he bit back his rage. It was taking everything he had not to lash out and kill the 2 nitwits who were ruining his plans. "It's cool, Mizuki-sensei. We all make mistakes," stated a grinning blonde. "Glad to hear it," forced out Mizuki behind his false grin. "Now give me, and Iruka, a moment to tally your score." It didn't take long for the score to be tallied. Naruto had done extremely well on all 4 portions of the exam. He wouldn't be getting Rookie of the Year, but his score was easily in the top 10. "Congratulations, Naruto, you've graduated," stated Iruka happily, as he handed Naruto his 8. Naruto took the metal plate, and chose a black bandana from the nearby table, and strung it through before placing the ornament proudly across his forehead, and heading back to the classroom, Hokage's office, some time later. "I'm glad Naruto was able to handle Mizuki without our interference," stated Sarutobi, as he deactivated his crystal ball, as Iruka began his standard graduation speech to the class. "Agreed. It's good to know he's able to stand quite strongly on his own 2 feet without either of us there to hold his hand. He'll need to be able to stand on his own in the trials that will come ahead." Agreed Theresa sagely. "So your visions of coming conflict surrounding young Naruto still persist?" asked the Hokage gravely. While the man was not overly superstitious, the accuracy of Theresa's visions and predictions could not be denied. "Yes, and they grow clearer by the day. I fear that war and danger are on the horizon, and our grandson will be caught at its center," stated Theresa calmly. The Hokage nodded his head, as he returned to his seat. Deciding to change the subjects, he stated, "No point worrying about things we can't yet change. Do you have any suggestions as to who young Naruto-sensei should be?" Hatake Kakashi has expressed a great interest in having the boy placed on his team should he graduate. I can see why. The boy does hold a strong resemblance to the man's late sensei, stated Theresa in her usual calm tone, though the barest hint of a smile was evident on her lips. That left Sarutobi speechless. Does she know? He questioned himself worriedly. Only he and Jiraiya knew for a fact, but several others, Kakashi included, suspected it at least. His question was answered for him, as Theresa chuckled. It's quite obvious for someone like me, but you needn't worry about Sarutobi-kun. Naruto's secret is safe with me. While I do not like keeping secrets from the boy, this one is not mine to give away, but I should warn you against holding it off for too long. One broken secret nearly destroyed Naruto's faith in you. I do not know what a second will do, finished Theresa seriously, her sightless eyes staring at aged Kage. The elderly Hokage nodded his head. Theresa made a valid point, and he knew he had to be careful of how he revealed it to his foster grandson. The fox's secret had nearly destroyed the bond the two had shared, and Sarutobi still doubted if it had ever been fully mended. As for young Kakashi, I do not believe he will be a suitable sensei. The boy's intentions are good, but he is too lost in the past to fully live in the present with Naruto-kun. There is also the fact that I'm sure the council will wish him to train young Sasuke, as well? Sarutobi nodded his head. There is a good deal of bad blood between Naruto and Sasuke, particularly after Naruto-kun gave him a reading he didn't particularly enjoy. I'd suggest a different teacher, perhaps, as an apprenticeship rather than a normal team. Who do you have in mind? Questioned Sarutobi curiously. Theresa's advice had always proven worth listening to. Anko Midarashi, stated Theresa calmly. The two have much in common, both hated and scorned for things beyond their control. I'm quite sure young Anko-chan would be good for Naruto-kun, and help him reach his full potential. Naruto-kun will also be good for Anko, helping her open up a bit to others, and trust a little easier. Sarutobi leaned back, and smoked his pipe for a bit. Theresa made a valid point, the two were quite similar, and would help each other grow in more ways than one. But there was still one problem. I can see your point, Theresa, and Anko has been interested in having her own genin team for quite some time, but there's one problem preventing it, he stated sadly. Ah, her former master's dark mark, stated Theresa coldly, a truly terrible thing, but if you'd allow me, I'm quite certain I could deal with it. You can? Questioned Sarutobi in surprise. But how? Not even Jiraiya, one of the best seal masters in Konoha's history, could remove it. I never said I could remove it, but I can make it completely harmless, answered Theresa calmly. How? Questioned the Hokage. By removing the portion of his soul that Orochimaru has bonded with his cursed seal to power and control it, answered Theresa. By doing so, the mark will lose all its connections with him, as well as its dark powers, and become nothing more than a harmless, if permanent, mark. She finished with a cold grin that sent a shiver down the old Hokage's spine. Can you really do such a thing? Questioned the old Hokage. It will not be easy, but it is doable. Call young Anko to your office either later today or tomorrow. Explain the situation to her, and tell her that if she wishes I'll remove the seal's hold over her in 2 days' time, whether she agrees to our deal or not. You'd help her even if she refuses? Why? Questioned the Hokage. Theresa had no obligation to help if her deal was refused, and since she was neither a shinobi nor an official resident of Konoha, he held no official authority over her. Generosity like that wasn't common in the ninja world. Because it is what Naruto-kun would want me to do, she stated calmly. Naruto is a very kind soul. He despises seeing others in pain, and will always seek to help those in need. I am merely doing, as my young apprentice would wish me to. Very well, I'll call her in later. But why wait for 2 days? Asked the Hokage. I have plans for tomorrow. I have promised Naruto a gift for his graduation, and I also believe it is time he learns of his bloodline, stated Theresa. I should be off. I promised Naruto-kun I'd meet him, and Irika after the exams were over to celebrate. Would you like to come along with Sarutobi-kun? I do believe I will. I think I've earned a brief break. While we walk, you can tell me more about this bloodline you believe Naruto inherited. What did you call it again? He asked, as he got up out of his chair. It is called the Archon bloodline, and it is possibly the oldest bloodline in existence in the world, she stated sagely, as she walked out the door. Thanks for watching my video, and make sure to check out the author of this fanfic. Link is in the description. See you next time. Till then, sayonara.